I'm back.
Welcome back.
Thank you
Um,
very much.
so for those of you who don't know, most of you already do, this is Chris Wilson, which is the managing director of Grinding Gear Games. And I think your role has changed a little bit as well as time goes on. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Oh, you're welcome. It's really good to be here. We've been trying to arrange this for a number of years, so
2
it's awesome to
years.
have time to be able to do it. Yes, indeed. I should prepare a tweet when we go live, by the way, right?
Yeah, yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll just work on that now.
Yep, go for it.
Sure.
Oh,
How's your day going?
dude, I have had someone mirror my axe today, so it's been a great day. Very nice.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But yeah, no, it's been really good. A lot of fun crafting, stuff like that. Just leveling a necromancer right now. See, you've been playing the league quite a lot as well.
Yeah, well, when I get time. I haven't so much in the last week because I was in China, but it's been going well when I have played.
Oh. Also, we are live right now. Like people are watching the stream.
Yep, I'm completely aware.
Okay, cool. Just making sure.
Yes,
Um,
of course.
yeah, what level did you get to now?
I'm 88 in hardcore so far. I was
Yeah.
planning to play solo self-found, but some people from the office wanted to play with me, and I didn't want to say no because I want to encourage as much play as possible. So I'm playing regular hardcore Abyss, and that's going pretty well.
Yeah. You usually play hardcore as well, right?
Yeah, I haven't played standard for. I think I played one character on standard on the live realm, and it wasn't really doing it for me as much as hardcore was, so I switched back.
Right. Does it ever become like obviously you're working a lot, so you don't have that many hours to play. Does that ever become problematic with playing hardcore?
Well, to some extent, it means that I'm only playing when I'm ready to play, if you see what I mean. I'm not kind of, pushing it into the evening too late because I have to get up for work the next day.
Right.
And I, well, I mean, most of us spend most of our playing time testing stuff in the office builds, if you see what I mean. There's always something new to have a look at, but that's not really done on legitimate characters. It's often done on fabricated characters. And so it's really nice to play a character from scratch in a real economy
Yeah.
on the online realm.
Do a lot of people get surprised when, like, do you trade a lot? And do people get surprised when you're trading them?
I don't trade with orange text, which is a thing I have to turn off specifically,
Ah,
and that way people don't give me, the dev price, which is either higher or
right.
lower depending on how they feel. But
You
but
nerfed my
if someone
build.
has,
This is gonna be 70 chaos for you. Yeah, I get it.
yeah, but if someone has a nice hideout, for example, I'll often cheekily like turn orange text on and then say nice hideout, bro, and then leave, which is causes them to reevaluate the whole trade.
That's pretty cool. I was just curious about one thing. Has anyone, like, obviously mirrors are quite rare, and I was wondering, with there is quite a lot of staff that actively play. Has anyone that is actual staff found a mirror on the live realm?
My understanding is that one of our QA staff, Henry, has found a mirror, but that may just be rumor within the office. I'm pretty sure it's true, but I haven't like spoken to him myself about it.
Oh, cool. That's really cool. And there used to be a bell that went off every time someone found a mirror, right?
No, that was just a lie that we either propagated or the community made up and we didn't correct. But we we have rudimentary logging for that kind of stuff because of course mirrors don't happen that often, but
Right.
there's no like, siren in the office or anything. We see it on Reddit when it happens anyway.
Oh man, I believe that. I really thought there was a bell that went off.
If we had a bell that everyone could hear, it would be for breaking the game build instead, when someone commits some
Right.
work that's broken, because then everyone can fix it. That would be more
Right.
useful for us.
Well, that kind of broke my heart. Next year you're gonna tell me fishing's not real. Um,
Oh no, phishing is far more real than the bell.
okay, that's good. I've been trying a lot, so hopefully something works. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm just typing in the tweet now. Chris is now live with Zizaran on stream. Twitch.tv/Zizaran seems okay, right?
Yep, that's great.
Cool. And I think I've spelt your name. How is it pronounced, by the way?
Zizaran.
Zizaran. Okay, sorry. I have only
No, it's
seen it written
fine.
down.
Like you didn't put an extra I in there, so I'm pretty happy.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll tweet that on up. This is the Path of Exile account. Yep. Okay, cool. Thanks.
Cool, you ready?
Yep.
Hey everyone, I'm here live with Chris Wilson, the managing director of Grinding Gear Games, and I have, I believe it's 9 or 10 questions, and the ones you see on my right here are the first batch of questions, and then we have another slide with a few more. So these are questions that I have chosen, and I think it's a lot of them are things that are going to be pretty cool to discuss. And there's some like the second slide have a couple of very interesting questions for a lot of you. So stay tuned, and we'll see what Chris Wilson has to say on all these things. So I want to start us off with the currency system is very unique. Like, there's no other game that has anything like it. So how did it start? Like, what was like the inspiring idea? Like, it's so different.
I'm really glad you brought this up because I was actually planning to write a news post about it. And when I was doing my stories from development news series recently over the holidays, I had kind of half a post written up, but it wasn't really big enough to make its own post. So I scrapped it. And you mentioning it is a great opportunity to tell the story here. So thank you. And this wasn't pre-planned. Like, this is just something you wanted to
Nice.
know. I didn't suggest this one. So anyway, so currency system. Well, basically, we'd all played a lot of action RPGs before Path of Exile, games like Diablo and Dungeon Siege, etc.
Yeah.
And they all had some token form of gold in the game. But what we found was that games like Diablo 2 and Guild Wars and so on had caps on how much gold you could actually trade to another player in one go. Like, you could put like 1,000,000 gold on the screen or whatever. And when you're dealing with high end game items, of course, that wouldn't really cut it. So people started trading with individual items. Like, for example, in Diablo 2, they would get Stone of Jordan rings or runes or even perfect gems and trade with a bunch of those. And likewise in Guild Wars, at least in the era that I stopped playing, people were trading with rubies as a store of value, essentially, even though they weren't functionally used for crafting in the game at the time. And so we were exposed a lot to high-end trades taking place with essentially currency items
Hmm.
rather than actual gold.
Yeah.
And so when we're designing Path of Exile, we were looking at this and we realized, of course, that in Path of Exile, people are going to be trading with various currency items. It's just a question of what they are. And so we figured, well, why not seed it with a few which actually have a use? Like, one of the nice things about gold in real life is you can make stuff from it, like jewelry or machinery and stuff like that. It's used in industry. And so it's like how people used to trade, salt, for example, back in Roman days. It's
Yeah.
something that has a utility for everyone. And so we designed our set of currency items, which were initially called homogeneous items, which is a terrible name, of course. But the reason why is because homogeneous
Yeah.
means all the same. And this was the case because we didn't want to clue people into the fact they were currency. We wanted them to kind of accidentally discover they were currency. Hey, look, I
Ah.
have so many chaos orbs. That's real strange. Maybe I should trade some. But eventually, the word homogeneous was too much of a mouthful, so we just went directly with currency items, and that seemed to work. And it was interesting because during the development of this, we realized that there probably isn't a need for actually having gold in the game at all.
Hmm.
I mean, the stuff that you do in town on other action RPGs has kind of been taken care of. Like, we didn't have durability, we didn't have mercenaries. Your flasks refill themselves. There's nothing to do with gold. You don't get it and you don't spend it. So we just removed it from the game entirely.
Yeah. That's really cool. Like, it's definitely my. Whenever someone asks me what's my favorite thing about Path of Exile, a lot of the times that's what I'll say. That and the skill tree. Obviously, something that puts some people off, but because it's so big and scary. But definitely my favorite things. But something I was wondering: is there any orb ideas that were like you were close to implementing that were later discarded? Like, obviously the Eternal Orb was in for a while and then got taken away. But
We've experimented with pretty much every permutation of orb that can do something. I mean, you'll see, for example, that Essence added a whole ton themed around the idea of deterministic single mod crafting, and that was something which we had discarded until the point where we undiscarded it and found a way to do it.
hmm,
And in the last league, Harbinger, we introduced a pile of experimental orbs, ones that we were interested to see how people would work with them. Things like, annulling a mod off an item. Pretty dangerous for crafting,
yeah,
but let's get some in the economy and see how it goes. And so we have had we've had a weird set of currency items in the past. Like, there's been experiments with putting them in tier brackets, for example, where you have your low level chaoses and your high level chaoses, and that way you can drop more chaoses, but they're not useful for the end game players. They're only useful during leveling,
yeah,
and all sorts of stuff like that. And there's merit to some of these ideas. Like, I could see it working. It's just, you have to have a specific reason to change the game that much. And I don't really feel that what we add by doing the tier thing, for example, makes Path of Exile that much better at this stage. It's kind of one of those
right,
things that could have been planned in from the start potentially. We have discussed, there's so many strange orbs. Like, an example of one that we keep rejecting every time it's brought up is the concept of fiddling around with item levels. Like, an
oh,
orb that increases an item level by 1 so that you can take your almost perfect item and raise its level a bit, then craft better mods on.
right,
Or things that bump up or down the tier of specific mods. So if you roll something that's a bunch of tier 1s and one tier 2 mod, the
yeah.
ability to randomly affect one of those. We've resisted touching those so far, and we probably won't touch those ones.
Hmm. And are there any orbs like that are like very imminent or something that you think will be implemented soon? Like any orbs on the horizon, basically?
So looking ahead at the next few leagues, so far I can't see any currency items that we haven't already put in the game. And that's not a clue that Eternals are coming back. It's not the case. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, we kind of got the new orbs out of our system to some extent with Harbinger. And the other thing is that a lot of our content is decided when it's needed. Like, for example, for the next league, if we realize that one of the rewards it needs to be rewarding is a new orb, that orb
Right.
gets made and put in the game without me knowing about it today. And I don't think that's the case because we have some cool ideas. But yeah, we could very easily add new currency. It's honestly the easiest thing to add to the game because it's just an icon and some code. There's no need for 3D models. There's no need
Right.
for audio, voice acting. You get the idea.
And what about the drop rates and stuff like that? Is that something that changes a lot over time, or are they pretty static?
I've tried to propagate the idea that we change the drop rates so that people don't have expectations of us never changing stuff. But realistically, in the last few years, the drop rates of currency just haven't really changed. I mean, they've settled into their pattern, if you see what I mean.
Right.
So, and at least at first, they did change quite a lot. And we're always resistant to dropping stuff based on the community's expectation of what it's worth. For example, for a long time, Divines were rarer than Exalts. And I can't remember the ratio at the moment, but they're at least as rare as Exalts are now, as far as I understand. But clearly not worth anything near as much. And part of that's because there's a divine recipe, which means that you get more, from the divine recipe rather than from the ground, but also because exalts are just highly demanded as a trade item and more useful when crafting.
Yeah.
And so we haven't gone, oh no, a divine's worth a third of an exalt or whatever, and then made more divines drop to make it a self-fulfilling prophecy. We've left things like blessed orbs remarkably rare considering how non-useful they are, because if they were both non-useful and common, what's the point of having them in the game?
And the Exalted Orb recipe is pretty hard to do as well.
Nice. With the one that requires a mirror.
Yeah. So, and do you have a favorite currency item?
I really like the Val Orb because that was one that wasn't in the initial spec, and it was a super risky one for us to add because it can brick items. And I think it just worked out really well. It's still being used. The Val Orb is probably, I mean, I understand Val skills are heavily used in some cases, the good ones, but
Yeah.
the Val Orb is probably the most impactful part of the Sacrifice of the Val expansion to this day because we have to consider Valing whenever we add new content to the game.
Yeah, no, I had taken a long break from PoE, and a friend of mine was like, "Oh, you should Vol that really good sword you have," and like, yeah, bricked. He didn't tell me that could happen.
Oh, right, I see. I think it says corrupting it unpredictably or something on the orb, which is meant to
Very
be a clue.
unpredictable. It was like,
Yeah, the thing is, there were suggestions for this that like the initial version of Valorb until like a week before we announced it was that 1/4 of the time it just outright destroys the item. Like there's an animation of the item getting shattered and then it's
oh,
gone. And so that's where the outcome of it does nothing but corrupts it came from, because we figured, well, I mean, in terms of optimizing it for endgame, just corrupting it and doing nothing is essentially destroying it because you've lost the opportunity of getting something perfect. And with a chance of it re-rolling to a rare, we knew there was still risk, and so we went with this rather than outright breaking the item. Oh, sorry, outright shattering the item.
that would have been pretty cool too, though.
Well, this is a case of us chickening out.
Right, right. Well, I mean, I really like it. I think it's like very risk reward. Like hitting a Vol feels really good on like, especially on a 6th link if you're like, yeah, pretty cool item.
Yep.
That's like pretty much the questions I have for the currency system. Very good warm up. And so I want to talk a little bit about obviously starting an indie company. How did what was the start? Like, was it inspired? What was inspired by? Like, how did Grinding Gear Games start? Is what I'm asking.
So I've been speaking with various friends for a while about the concept of us making an action RPG. I mean, this, from a business point of view, this is driven by us looking at the market and saying, okay, so there's a lot of people that played games like Diablo, Diablo 2, Dungeon Siege, and so on, and there haven't really been any games for that genre that have come out. I mean, it was in the era of Titan Quest was getting a bit old. There was no Diablo 3 on the horizon. It's just kind of a dead genre, kind of like RTS's art to some extent. And so we looked at it and said, there's a lot of people there that would just pay some money for an action RPG right now. Well, why don't we go and make one? With the youthful enthusiasm of a couple of guys who know how to code, figuring they can just make a large AAA game by themselves, which is something I don't recommend, by the way. It's quite hard. So we threw ourselves into it, and we had to get other people involved to help with funding and that, it's being time consuming and so on. But we threw we threw everything we had into it. We emptied our bank accounts, we emptied our souls into getting this started until the point where eventually we were able to release supporter packs a few years later, and the
Yeah.
community was able to help out. And that was really kind of the turning point then, because at that point we knew that it was a sustainable thing, that we were able to, continue to hire people and expand the game, and there wasn't the uncertainty of will people actually like this and or pay for it that we had in the first few years.
And in the start, were you doing things like programming, or like what was your like in the very beginning? What was your role?
So I'm a programmer by training, so a C++ coder, and I have written code on the game. I think the socket generation code might be the last stuff that's still in there that I've touched,
All right.
though I do go and fix stuff every now and then when there's problems that other people are too busy to deal with. But early on, we pretty much divided it up. So Jonathan was working on core architecture. He was working on the realm as it was and the engine. Eric was working on getting concept art done. In terms of like, hey, here's what the character classes are going to look like and what Act 1 and 2 is sketched out to be like. And I was working on item system prototyping. So that meant like caring about mods and how they work and getting prototypes in place that would generate them and seeing how we feel about the items and that kind of stuff, and helping out Jonathan with programming stuff, while also all of the design was done by the three of us back then. It was something that we would, go to dinner and just talk about like how stash tabs are going to work or how the
Oh,
skill tree is going to work and so on. And so that first year was just basically mostly talking, and I was documenting it and writing it down and making sure it wasn't contradictory and working out the problems that would later, need resolving. And this went on for ages until we had dedicated people who could actually help out. Like after a while, I stopped working on the code unless it was something that, I could help Jonathan with. And we kind of had me in a consolidated design role for a number of years where I was basically doing all of the balance of the game and so on, because we had no, like, before you can hire someone for a role, you have to do it yourself to know what it is. Like, if you've got a game and you don't know anything about balance and you say hire a balance guy, that's not going to end well. You kind of need to set the balance up and then train someone, and then they'll hopefully do it better than you because they've learned from your mistakes. And so at the moment, I just keep 100% away from balance. I'll go and discuss stuff with people. Like I'll say, hey, you sure this stuff's okay? I've been reading Reddit and it looks like a problem, and then we'll work out a solution to it. But I'm not actually the one in there fiddling with the values on a day-to-day basis.
But so programming wise, if we don't get a 16 for 3,000 or 4,000 fusings, that's directly our fault.
I did completely come up with the odds of all of that myself, and the quirks of like the ratios behind how strength X and int affects the colors, and the fact that it's harder to color high level items and so on. That's all just stuff that's been there from the beginning without any change. And to some extent, that's because maybe it's been overlooked, or to some extent, it's because maybe it's right. But there were things in there that we just arbitrarily decided towards the start that felt right and have just been how Path of Exile is from that point onwards. And I think those stuff add a lot of color to the game, and it would be a shame for us to kind of fiddle with them years later, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, for sure. I was just making sure people know who to blame if their chest doesn't sink in 6,000 fusings.
Yes.
But and obviously your role has changed like a lot over time. Like you were saying, you don't have time to like obviously you can't micromanage as much as you could in the start. Like early on, you did like the what's the actual name for the build series again? It's
Build of the week.
Build of the week, right? That's it. Like you were able to do stuff like that in the start. Like, is there anything you wish you were able to be more involved with directly, specifically?
Well, as a side note, the reason why I did the build of the week is the same philosophy of before you can hire someone to do something, you have to do it yourself. Like I wanted to work out how that series should work and then pass it on. In terms of stuff that I'd like to do more, I mean, obviously working on the game is really fun, and any piece of tax paperwork I have to do takes away from that. And so one of the things I'm trying to do is to get more infrastructure in place so that I can work on the game more and less on the business side of stuff. But I am at least quite present during any important meetings and instrumental in the design and future of where the game's going. So, for example, I'll scope out what needs to be addressed in an upcoming expansion, make sure the plans are good, make sure the team are working on it, check in on them, every day or two to see how that's going, play early versions of it, give them feedback, arbitrarily decide to scrap stuff and add new stuff. And that kind of stuff without actually being the person who decides. Like, for example, if we're coming up with some new boss fights in the next league, I don't necessarily know what they are at this stage. At some point I'll play them, but it's kind of cool to play them late. Like, I purposefully held back playing Acts 5 through 10 until as late as I could. Like just before release is when I actually have a look at the content, because that way I'm seeing, is this quality acceptable for us to release? As opposed to the developers that have handcrafted it meticulously over years and are way too close to the metal to be able to judge, it relative to other things.
Right. And So that means that, like, not necessarily now, but in the future, you're going to be more involved in like just the design part of things, or the actual programming side. Like, which one would you like want to go back to doing, if you do less
It's
business stuff?
it's not really efficient for me to work on the programming except when it's something that I'm good at.
Mm.
And I say that because I'm traditionally a low-level programmer who likes, pretty hardcore stuff. And so if there's a problem that's fun to solve and the people are having difficulty doing it, I love to jump in and try to help them out, which they probably find really annoying. But it's something I like to do. But my goal is to work more on the design side and making sure that stuff is released to as high a quality standard as we can do and continues to push interesting ideas forward. Because I feel that Path of Exile's success comes from the fact that we try to do weird things like the map system and let's release 10 acts and so on. And we need more of that, basically just things that turn the game on its head. And
Yeah.
we kind of, now that we've set that as a standard, we have to continue to follow through with it. And those things require, like, the staff aren't necessarily 100% willing to turn the game on its head without having founder approval. So having the
Yeah.
founders in the process means we'll come up with more crazy ideas together that they can feel comfortable, are sanctioned and okay for them to do.
Nice. Well, that sounds really exciting. That's good to hear, and I'm sure it's something you would like enjoy doing more yourself as well, especially having been doing that before. So, yeah, definitely
Yeah, I
looking
mean,
forward to that.
it's something I am doing, of course, all the time, but I'd
Yeah.
like to do it more. I mean, it's supposed to be because tax paperwork is horribly boring, right? Like all this kind of just running a company is not, I mean, it's work and it's useful, but it's kind of catching up rather than making new things, if you see what I mean.
Right. No, for sure. Well, we were talking about design, and that's a great one to move into the next topic of league design. Um, how does it like start? Do you guys have a bunch of leagues that are already pre-designed? Like, what goes into, for example, making it interesting for everyone, and how do they start out?
So I would love to say that we have like a well of leagues that are basically ready to go and we pick the best one out of the hat. But
Mm.
honestly, at the moment, mostly because we had a lot of catch up to do in terms of getting 300 and 310 out. When we start a new league, we have nothing, and we have to work out what Path of Exile needs right now. And that's, in a way, producing the best quality content because we start with a blank canvas and we just look at the game, look at what the community wants, and make a league around that. There's none of this, well, we've got 4 made, which one fits? None of them do kind of situation.
Mm.
So that means that the league that we have planned for March is a really good one, and it means that the expansion content that we're working on for June is stuff that the players are going to be quite interested in, rather than kind of a canned thing that we started work on years ago that doesn't reflect the needs of Path of Exile. And as a corollary, like, let's say we're going to make a 400 in the future. I mean, no planning is yet done on 400. It's something we're going to get started on when we
Mm.
get time to. But when we start planning 400, we've got to start planning it based on now. But 400 is going to have to represent what Path of Exile needs when it comes out, in 18 months or 2 years or whatever. And so that's why it's really important, if you do start something ages in advance, to make sure that it's going to slot in correctly. Like, for example, the 6 acts thing in 300 was exactly what the game needed at the time because people
Yeah.
were getting super frustrated with playing through multiple difficulties. So that was really good. But if our big 300 expansion was something completely unrelated, like another PvP overhaul or whatever, then it could have been something the players are like, well, that's cool, but I don't see how it really helps me a lot right now. What I want is the difficulties to go away. And so it's super important when we're starting work on long-term stuff that it's going to improve the game when it's released rather than being something that would improve the game right now.
And when we were saying about the 6 additional acts, it was, or at least from like the community point of view, we were only expecting to get one more act. Like, was that something where you guys said like, okay, let's do all 10 and get rid of the difficulties? Like, how did that like start?
Surprise. Okay, so we work very closely with the other platforms that Path of Exile is on, like China and Xbox. And it was very apparent when we were pushing a lot of new players through the testing versions of these that the difficulties thing was both a problem for new players and for existing players. Like, our community on Reddit would say, oh, I hate 3 difficulties. Can we go down to 2? And, because they don't want to play through the 3rd difficulty. And so we see that. And at the same time, we have this problem on the other platforms when we're pushing new players through that they drop off after the end of Act 4. And adding Act 5 would merely mean they drop off after the end of Act 5.
Right.
And so when someone says to you, okay, so you've played the game, now play it again and it's harder, and then again and it's harder, and then you get the cool stuff, there's a pretty good chance someone just finishes after the first playthrough. And so at that time, we had legitimately only planned Act 5. Like, we're approaching release, and, well, I mean, it was still ages away from release, but relative to the development of Act 5, we were approaching release, and we had a tough decision to make, where we could do the Act 5 expansion now, and then come back and do more difficulties, more levels. Sorry, extend the Act playthrough
Right.
to 10 acts later on, which was a potential option for 400. The issue is we didn't really want to have the huge Chinese launch and the huge Xbox launch with the difficulties in place. Like, we looked at the math and realized numerically, like, if we do that, we're going to lose money. Whereas if we can get these difficulties gone and have it be a 10-act playthrough, it's worth whatever it costs. And so we put the resources towards it and made it happen. And I suspect this did result in 300 having a launch that was a little bit later than it was expected. I mean, it launched in August, I think, and we were discussing earlier in the year, but it was worth it because it meant that at the point that the China release happened, at the point the Xbox release happened, people had a big 10-act storyline to play through that led into the Atlas of Worlds content. And that worked really well. The game became a lot more seamless.
Yeah, well, I mean, Legacy was a great league to extend as well. Like Legacy was a lot of fun, and like you got to pick your league. So definitely, like I think I played the entire 6 months of Legacy, and it was like felt pretty well. Like it was a very fun league. Um, but for the new acts, like Act 5 to 10, which one's your favorite? Does anything like stand out to you personally, where you're like, wow, this is really cool?
I really like the environments in Act 9. Like, Act 9 is absolutely my favorite to play through. It just, I don't know, there's so much detail in the desert, the monsters are cool. Yeah, that's my favorite.
Nice. Um, so when the league is designed, like who do you focus on? Like what kind of player are you trying to make it the most interesting for?
So with League design, there's much more of a formula behind it than with expansion design. With expansion design, which I understand isn't exactly what you asked, but I'm going to say it anyway, it's a matter of us focusing on the three groups. There's new players, returning players, and existing players. So new players is when someone hears about this, they're going to say, I don't really know anything about Path of Exile, but damn, I'm going to try it out because that sounds cool.
Right.
And then there's existing players who are the people who right now are writing on Reddit what they want to see in the future. And it's very important to keep those players happy and to make those changes because they know exactly what the game needs and they are right about most of the things that they comment on. So it's important for the game to move forward and to fix problems for us to focus on that. The issue is, of course, if we just focused on the issues that currently bug existing players, that's not a marketable thing for new players. We release it and people look at it and say, this is an unintelligible mess of what looks like bug fixes and strange reworks of old systems. And that's not exciting for them to say, damn it, now's the time to play Path of Exile. And the third group is the returning players. And this is more and more relevant. So returning players are anyone that stops playing Path of Exile during the league and is looking forward to the next content if it's interesting enough. And they're players who might not necessarily be swayed by the concept of us bug fixing a bunch of QOL stuff, but they would certainly be happy to hear about content that they understand. And those returning players have a lot more potential to understand things. Like if we say, look, there's a crazy new type of skill gem, they'll understand what that means, whereas a new player won't do because they don't know what skill gems are. And so we found that balancing a mix of an expansion's content among those three groups helps to find what the expansion is. So, for example, 300, which released the new acts, is very new player focused and also very focused on returning players because someone who's played Path of Exile before loves the idea of playing 6 new acts.
Yeah.
For an existing player, though, I mean, it's great. They'll love the acts, but at the same time, we didn't change the Atlas very much in that expansion. So for many people, 300 was a chance to see the new acts, and then it's kind of the same as before with a new league. It wasn't as impactful as it could have been. And that's why we quickly followed up, breaking our normal schedule, with the 310 expansion that included the Atlas content, because that's basically a massive revamp for existing players to give them a lot of new stuff to do. And we felt that was important to give a fresh endgame so that people who were playing the old endgame felt that it had actually changed.
That was an insane schedule as well. You guys must have been working crazy overtime to get that in.
Getting that in before Christmas was an absolute mission, but it was necessary. Like, if it still wasn't out by now, people would have been playing the 300 stuff until now, and the Atlas stuff, having not changed for more than a year, was starting to get a bit old. And so it was very important that we get that in. So with League design, on the other hand, there's more of a formula to it because we can't miss out certain things. So leagues have to be there from the very first levels. Like if you're not encountering the league in the Strand once you finish town, then it's not there. And this is like a saying they have when they're designing Magic the Gathering cards is the theme has to be at common, meaning the common cards have to have the theme. It's not something you can just say for a couple of rares in each set. And so we have to have it that when you exit town, you can encounter the league immediately. And it has to be a fun experience for the people that only play through a few acts. In fact, because most expansions add endgame content, the league is often there as the only core content for the main game, which you can see in War for the Atlas, because the war takes place entirely in the Atlas. The Abyss League is the only noticeable new content apart from some balance and skill stuff. that you can actually play through in the core storyline. So it's super important that the League is engaging during the actual game. Likewise, for many people, the League is the only, or for some expansions, the League is the only impactful change to the end game. For example, with Harbinger, that was all that changed with the Atlas in 3.0, apart from a few more monsters to add variety. If Harbinger's fun in maps, then the maps feel different than the last League, and so on. So it's important that the League adds something to both the core game and the end game. And then, of course, there's discussion about rewards, where there have to be like multiple levels of rewards. You've got your immediate rewards from actually fighting the monsters. And in some leagues, we failed on that, where you kill the monsters and they don't drop items, or they don't have, I mean, like Anarchy is a good example of the rewards being good, because the Rogue Exile drops a full set of rares.
Right.
Likewise, in Breach, you get tons of stuff for fighting in Breaches. Abyss, we specifically turned item drops on, as opposed to the discussion of, well, this is a lot of items, maybe we should have them off. We want to make sure that moment to moment you're getting experience, you're getting items for engaging in League content. For some of the ones in the past, you didn't. I mean, like Tempest is an example where you only get items if you roll a specific Tempest that gives you the items. Nemesis is another example. The only way to get an item is if the inner treasure mod spawns.
Yeah.
And so current League design has items all throughout the fights that you have. Then, of course, there's the next tier up of what's the thing that you're grinding for overall. Like, for example, are you trying to get access to some endgame areas? Are you trying to, collect breach stones? Are you trying to, get into the abyssal depths, and what items can drop from there? And so it's important for us to have a goal of what happens when people repeat the League content a lot of times. And of course, then there's League specific items. What new things can you find? Is it breach rings? Is it Stygian vices and abyss jewels and so on? And we're making sure to layer the rewards in like this, so that there are short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals within the League, because some people play different lengths. If you have no immediate rewards, the person who's only playing 20 hours doesn't see anything.
Yeah.
If you have no very long-term rewards, the person who's playing 20 hours a day for 90 days doesn't have anything to work towards. And those can, of course, come in the form of unique items that are specific to the League. Like Headhunter, for example, is something that most people in Nemesis never experience, but it's there and has an impact on the game years later as a chase thing that people can get. And so a good League has all of these elements together, plus a cool theme to go on top of it. And because of that, there's this recipe that we're basically trying to follow, where we make sure we tick all of these boxes. With expansions, we have tons more flexibility.
And on the leagues, like, has there ever been a discussion, like, not necessarily just go back and add to it, but do a league expansion, like, okay, advanced Tempest, or like advanced Beyond? Like, have you ever thought about bringing back a league and building a lot on it?
So sometimes we do spiritual sequels to stuff without really saying it. Like Breach is technically a sequel to Beyond.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, because when we released Beyond, it got, like most new leagues, it gets a negative reaction because there's some players who vocally don't like some aspect of it. And this is the thing we've grown to become accustomed to, is that there'll be a backlash at some point about whatever we release. But it got to the point where when we mention Beyond later, people say, oh, I hated that league. Enough people are saying that we were aware that when we made a sequel to it, we had to do it in a way where we never said the word Beyond. We had a thematic connection. And so that's why, technically, Beyond is where the monsters come to you, and Breach is where you're going to Beyond like monsters. And we made sure to differ them very, very slightly, but kept the names similar, so that it felt to the people who care about the lore like a sequel to Beyond. But to people who cared about the gameplay, it was its own thing that was just 100% different from the rules of Beyond and the rewards of Beyond and so on.
And a lot of the more recent leagues have optional mechanics, like Breach and Abyss, where you have to step on it and then it'll activate. And back in the day, there would be like Onslaught, where everything is just faster, or Torment, where there's ghosts. So what I'm basically talking about is optional versus forced mechanics. Are there going to be more forced mechanics like Tempest?
So the league design is totally different back in the pre-Talisman days, because we used to do 2 leagues simultaneously, and they had to be smaller. I mean, the team was a fraction of the size. Like, Tempest was a ton of work to do at the same time as Warbands, and both of them were not really what you'd class as modern leagues. Like, if we release Tempest now, people would be so disappointed. It feels like a race mod compared to something like Abyss that's got multiple boss fights and extra levels and all sorts of crazy graphical stuff.
Yeah.
So there is a very different era of league design then. With regard to forced versus optional, so whenever we do a forced mechanic, you kind of have the invasion problem, where some people aren't very good at Path of Exile. They're happily playing, but they just don't have the hand-eye coordination or the dexterity or the game knowledge. And forced mechanics get in their face and kill them in ways that they're not liking. Whereas optional ones, they can learn I'm not going to walk on that breach in this level. It's far too dangerous. Or in this map, there's like crit mods and extra fire damage, and I'm just not going to stand on the breach. I can handle the rest of it, but I don't know what's coming out of that.
Yeah.
And so there's a certain advantage to the ability for a player to brace themselves and prepare for a harder encounter, because if it's forced, we have to make it easy. And we would rather have league content be challenging, especially because it's a challenge league. Now, that's not to say that there won't be forced content in the future. Of course, there's going to be 4 leagues a year for, a dozen more years. So that's 50 leagues that we've got to come up with, and some of them will be forced. But I think that the ability for the player to prepare and then engage with something has some niceness to it, where they can kind of assess what the threat's going to be like, clear out some of the area, and feel good about engaging with the content rather than having it thrown upon them in the middle of an existing fight.
I'm still so happy you said dozen more years. Like, I have a job for a dozen more years. This is great.
Well, hopefully longer.
That's great. Great to hear it. I mean, I play Path of Exile a lot. Um, and again, on the leagues, like, what about reworking? Like, a lot of people always ask about like prophecy and stuff like that. Is that something you want to go back and add more to?
Yeah, it is. There's actually a big Reddit thread about this morning that I kind
Oh,
of wanted to address. So the thread is basically people saying, like, this is a common thing they say, that they would love it for us to take a cycle and just improve the old stuff in the game. Like, basically for our expansion announcement to be, hey guys, there is no expansion, but look at this big list of changes.
oh,
And then that list of changes would make everyone happy. And this is a common thing that's requested. Now, we want to achieve this, but not in exactly the way that they're asking. So if we said, guys, there is no expansion here, here's some changes, without a doubt that improves the game. But I 100% guarantee you that it will like significantly hurt the company financially. Like, we need the releases because we need the influx of returning players. Like, the company can make money and it's good, but not at the end of the league. When people are waiting for the next one, the company is not making money. And so it's important that we have new exciting releases. So what we're going to do with regard to revamping old content is interleave it with the schedule. Obviously, we're going to try to target the most important stuff first. But there are so many things we're reworking at the moment that are targeted to go in alongside leagues. So the next league introduces some revamping of old content. Like, for example, we've promised an Ascendancy rework. The Ascendancy rework done in the next league is extensive, far more so than we've promised, right? There's a lot of work there, and people are going to love it. And then the next expansion, again, has reworking of old content. And then at the same time, we've got the new character models we're working on. We've got revamping of old acts that we're doing. And this kind of stuff is just going to get released as it's ready. And
cool.
we're making sure, like, I have a stash QOL push scheduled for the next league that I'm hoping we'll get time to get in. There's just so much stuff that we want to improve, but we're not going to take the approach of taking 3 months without any actual expansion content.
Yeah.
We're just going to get that stuff targeted over time. So you will see many releases of revamping old stuff this year alongside the introduction of new and exciting content. So you can know the next league is something to look forward to on its own merits, plus it fixes a bunch of old stuff. And we'll just keep pushing on that.
And for example, like Path of Exile's engine, for example, is that something that ever holds it back? And like for those who don't know a lot about programming, is like the engine something you can change or upgrade over time?
For a number of years, from say 2013 through 2000 and early 16 maybe,
Huh?
we didn't really have very much changing with the engine during that period. That was partly because we didn't have the manpower on our side or the money to be able to afford it. And so we released the game with the engine as it was, and then it kind of sat there not getting optimized, and performance gradually got worse and worse and worse. And then once we started the Xbox project, we formally needed to actually hire an engine team. Like, we had to go out there and find some internationally awesome people and hire them and have this team who would work on both making sure we supported new platforms, but also making the engine as fast as it could be, especially because consoles are not high-end computers. They're affordable computers at lower spec. And so, with the exception of the Xbox One X, which is a beast, that thing, by the way. Anyway, so we needed to have a good engine team to work on this stuff. And so that's where the performance improvements started around 250 or 240, where we multi-threaded the engine, we added dynamic resolution, we completely revamped how a lot of stuff works. And those guys are still working away, making things faster bit by bit. Now, I mean, obviously, if you ask the community, they'll say it hasn't improved, but we can see from our telemetry that the game is massively faster, meaning that it would be massively slower if we hadn't done that work.
Right.
It's enabled us to have so much more stuff going on, and you can see in current maps the amount of monsters you're fighting and the amount of effects going off exceeds what it was in the past. So to some extent, the engine guys are kind of playing catch up, to make sure that it keeps up with that at acceptable frame rates. But they're going to continue working on this stuff. I mean, at no point here are we scaling down that team. They're just going to go and go and go. And there are things we haven't announced that are coming up soon that people will see as significant improvements for stuff that they've complained about regarding the engine. I'm not going to pre-announce that here because other people want to announce it. But there's fun stuff that I think the community will appreciate that has come out of this engine team's work. And while people may say the game only feels like it's performing worse, I'm sorry you feel that way, but we are working as hard as we can to improve it. And we believe the data shows significant improvements each time that we do.
Cool. I remember especially the 2.6 performance changes were like the biggest for me, where I like really felt a big difference. So definitely excited for more of that.
Yep, they're working on it, and there's some cool stuff coming up. One of the things we've been caring about a lot recently is server performance. Like for the players who are playing crazy maps, like imagine you've max sextanted a map, you've got just every mod that can make it as large as possible, and you've got 6 players in it. That kind of experience there, where with certain builds it becomes a bit of a server-side slideshow, like you're pegging a core of one of our server CPUs, for example. That's getting fixed. We're working as hard as we can to make it that the game can cope with that level of content being completed at that rate. And of course, this will have side effects of improving client performance where we can do.
Cool. Well, we have a similar topic to this that we'll delve into a little deeper later that I know a lot of people are interested to hear about. So just to wrap up like the league design, do you have a favorite league that you really enjoyed playing versus like a league that you maybe wished ended up differently?
Oh, I have opinions about every single league here. I really liked playing Nemesis. At the time, at least for my character, the mods felt incredibly impactful and rippy whenever you encounter a new rare monster. Having to stop and make sure you understand the Nemesis mod is something that stayed with me to this day. And so I just felt that for such a simple league to implement, that was one of the most impactful. Having said that, nothing compares to the awesomeness of recent leagues. I mean, Breach was a blast to play. I really enjoyed playing Abyss so far. It's probably the one I've played the most on the live realm since Talisman. I'm slightly disappointed with Talisman because it was one that I had a large portion of the design work for,
Right.
and I was very conservative with the itemization because introducing a new type of better amulet was something that we worried about having massive effects on the game in the future. And so, we're very conservative with how often they drop and how often they're rare and making sure they're corrupted. And I was hoping the community would react better to those particular items. And some people liked them, of course, but since then we've been more generous with league rewards as a lesson from Talisman. And partially from Breach as well, where with Breach rings, we were happy for them to drop as rare rather than as anything and relatively common. But then the corrupted nature of them also meant that people weren't really getting the insane drops. And it's been cool since then to see on Reddit the fact that, every second post is someone saying, look at this amazing item I've got. I feel really good about having it. And other people saying, holy crap, I had no idea you could make that. That's cool. And that kind of stuff is what Path of Exile is meant to be about.
And how did you feel about Dark Shrine? Was that a league you liked?
We don't really class Dark Shrine as a league, more as kind of a extended race event, if you see what I mean. So the backstory with Dark Shrine was we'd just done a 1 month. I forget which expansion this was leading up to the release of. It was just before Talisman stuff.
Dark Shrine was right after the 1 month hardcore.
Yeah, it was after the 1 month. I can't remember what was coming after, but whatever it was that was coming after it was late. And so we had to throw a 1 month hardcore in there. And then towards the end of that, with a couple of weeks to go, we realized we need another month. And you can't have nothing running on Path of Exile. Just standard is going to upset people, and you kind of permanently damage the game by not having people engaging in new stuff. So we needed to pull another 1 month out. And we could have just done another 1 month, but Jonathan had this idea of taking one of our crazy league suggestions that was rejected and making it into a 1 month event. And so he single-handedly crafted Dark Shrine as quickly as he could in an attempt to have this league. And it was fun, right? You get crazy stuff going on.
I loved
it. The average player, and by average, I mean not up to the understanding of you guys, the average player who isn't engaging with Reddit and this podcast, for example, kind of played it for a day and then stopped.
Right.
And the people who completely understand the game and make it their life and their passion, they loved it because they can find abusive, cool stuff to do and interesting interactions.
Yeah.
But from a player numbers point of view, Dark Shrine was worse than the 1 month before it. It was kind of a non-event in terms of actual, player numbers and interest in it on a global scale. And so we've kind of learnt the best thing to do is actual real leagues, or things like Mayhem and Turmoil have quite a lot better reception than Dark Shrine in terms of players.
Yeah, I mean, my Dark Shrine was one of my favorite things ever because you had to explore it. I remember somebody asked in chat can you put maps in them? And I was like, oh my god, can you? And we put in a map. and it was me and Carvarosco in the map, and I think the game froze for like 5 seconds. So it was like loading in resources, and it said, "Careful now," and we were like, "Oh my god, what is this?" So like the mystery and stuff of Darkshrine was a lot of fun.
Nice. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And we liked the mystery as well. I mean, it was kind of a shame that people could data mine tables of text from it, and
Yeah.
the community really quickly put together everything that happened. And maybe it would have been better to stagger the content so there was like 2 new Darkshrine mods getting enabled each day or something like that.
Um, Speaking of data mining, that wasn't really something that happened back in the day, because I remember it used to be more like, oh, we've added unique items to the game, and people would like post them on the forum.
Hmm.
That's something that like what changed there? Were we always able to data mine or
Well, the data mining tools are getting better
right?
because, well, I mean, there's literally tools where when we release a new content or GPK, they drag it into their tool, it goes and gets all the items and says what's new. Like it dumps within seconds the list of new stuff.
Right.
And so, I mean, we understand whenever we release a version of the game to be very careful what's included. Like obviously, like a patch next week that adds some improvements to the map stash tab isn't dragging in the name of the next league, for example, because
Oh,
it's not being merged to it. But um, sometimes when you're working on stuff in advance, like let's say we start work on the December league tomorrow, and when we release our next one, it might include the name of that because it was tagged in together at the same time. We have to be very careful to strip stuff out. And stripping Act 5 through 10 content out of patches like Breach was massively time consuming. Like the amount of work that goes into hiding stuff that we want to get marketing value from can be quite high.
yeah.
Now, of course, there are solutions to this. We can make it a war where the tools stop working and they have to make new ones. But there's kind of a waste of resources to just fight against the tool authors. They're eventually going to win. So the best solution is the stuff isn't data mineable. To answer your question, uh, in the past, there was less going on simultaneously. Like right now, we're working on a league, we're working on an expansion which has a league, and long term, we have to start very soon working on whatever the next big expansion is. And so that's a lot of stuff done in parallel, and it makes it really hard to control what content's going in, in terms of privacy reasons. So I suspect that as we've started to become more parallel, it's become harder to hide stuff from data mining, and that's why it's getting more effective. To answer your question about uniques, we actually started releasing information about the uniques ourselves because controlling the order that they're released and making sure that it comes out from us works pretty well at getting attention to them in the right order, and making sure that people are excited. And it gives us cool stuff to talk about in the lead up to the expansion. It means that people can plan their builds around these new uniques rather than seeing one revealed on the forum a day after the
Right.
expansion's launched and having to change what they play. Having said that, I do like. So our problem with all the uniques being discoverable simultaneously was the first day of a league was just posts about the new uniques, and then it was all over. Like if we staggered it, so hey, there's a new unique being enabled each day, so there was one unique post per day. That kind of thing might be interesting, but why delay content from the players entirely to make Chris happy with how it looks on Reddit, right? It's a bit silly.
Well, I mean, this is you were saying about unique items. This is perfect to go into our next topic, which is item design and stuff like that. So we can open up with, do you have a favorite unique item?
That's a good question. I mean, my favorite to play with is Belly of the Beast because I keep finding it and it's awesome for my characters.
Huh.
So that's the one that I've spent the most time caring about. But I mean, I like a lot of the uniques. Like I like things like Goldrum for their place in the game, where it's just a thing that you can get when you have to fix your resists on twinking characters and so on. Yeah, so there are some favorites there.
Cool. And are there any uniques that you've personally designed or had like a very direct hand in designing?
I influence quite a lot of them, but the one that adds Val Purity of Elements, I think I forget the name. The one that adds that has the corruptible version. That's an amulet. I directly designed.
Purity, right? Yeah, gluttony of
It
elements, blood of
it
corruption.
is it is the most embarrassing thing in the world that I can't remember the name that unique got released with. Even though
Um,
that was theoretically a custom design that I did, but yeah, hopefully no one notices that.
Tear lapis something. It's a lapis amulet. I know which one you're talking about. I only remember the blood of corruption
Yeah,
part.
it's not an impactful item, right? Like it was done as a cool thing because we don't have anything like that, and then probably no one used it. But I technically had a hand in designing that one, and it's completely
Um,
fine for a unique to not be used by people as long as it adds an interesting thing that can be used in the future.
that mirror or that unique single-handedly made me 5 mirrors in Legacy League.
What happened?
Oh, like it was just with Uberit Siri and the way Legacy worked with League Stones. I would do like 2 breaches in the Uberit Siri area. So I would like run up to Ziri, kill one stage with Blood of Corruption on. Then I would just log out, go clear a breach to fill up the amulet again, log out again, and like just like I did every stage with like full elemental immunity. So I love your unique. It's one of my favorites.
Oh, that's awesome. That really pleases me to hear that.
But yeah, no, like very very cool item, and I was always like really annoyed that you couldn't like stack up multiple amulets full of wild souls. But yeah, very very cool.
Thanks. That's cool. I mean, one thing with designing uniques is every person who designs it, whether it's a designer or a supporter, wants their unique to be the chase thing. Like they all want to have Skyforth. In fact,
Yeah.
Skyforth wanted to have Skyforth, and then he got it, which was lucky. But a lot of people didn't get an item that was as chase as they'd wanted, because there can't be 700 best uniques out of 700. And so that's always something that's very difficult. But it's really pleasing because uniques sit in the game like underused magic cards, where in the future you find a combination that works incredibly well with it. You know, something like 3 dragons may not be used on top tier builds this exact second, but
Right.
it instantly pops up again the second there's a need for it. The same with like Shackles of the Wretched, for example. It sits there performing a purpose. It's extremely good at that purpose, and then there'll be a need for it. So 3 years from now, there'll be an amazing Shackles build, for example.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of like things become more apparent or have better uses than when other things are added to the game. Something I was wondering about, you can no longer purchase a unique item design, right?
That's correct.
And what was the decisions behind that? Like, was it just too much work or?
Well, part of it is the expectation. Like we were finding more and more that new unique designers wanted to have a unique that was impactful and wanted to cover new ground. Like, and making uniques that have skills on them and all this crazy stuff was just getting so expensive and time consuming. It was getting to the point where, you know, we were substantially working on getting their uniques to work rather than actually working on new content. And I mean, you know, we were selling them at the time at $2,500. So we're getting a situation where we make $2,500 before tax, and we spend, say, $15,000 on trying to get it to work, and then the supporter's unhappy, so we spend another $12,000 reworking it, and then it delays $1 million worth of expansion or more. You know, it's
Right.
that kind of thing. So, I mean, this isn't a direct rant about any particular supporter. They're wonderful people and we appreciate the support. But in general, we were feeling this theme that it was becoming a bit of a burden to work on the uniques. And so our goal is to do a great job on all the remaining ones that people have paid for. And we felt that that's enough of a commitment to adding uniques from the community. And we would rather kind of have control of how uniques are added in the future, because our design team can take no for an answer much more easily than someone who's incredibly passionate about making their mark on the game and has just spent a very large amount of money generously.
Yeah. And you can currently buy divination cards, and is that something that's staying?
Yeah, we don't advertise it particularly heavily because it's a bit of a customer support task to get it added to your account and so on. But basically, the way it works is as follows. If you have a top tier pack that's a $480 one or equivalent, you can top up to a divination card by paying the difference that would make it $1,100, which is what the initial supporters paid. So it's not cheaper now to get one, but it adds up to the same amount as if you bought the pack at the time. So we've never stopped selling it. And the way the process works is once you've bought this, it entitles you to submit a divination card. And this is a somewhat automated process. It gives you a list of all of the different items and stuff. I mean, I'm sure you probably know this, but for the benefit of the audience, it gives you a list of all the items that are available. And you can submit this along with some flavor text and a suggested name. So if I want something that drops a red beak, then I'll submit red beak. And if I want, I'll call it Chris's red beak card and I'll write a poem and submit it. And what will happen then is it goes in a queue and the person reviewing it will say, okay, totally fine for there to be an item dropping red beak. It's not going to be called Chris's red beak card. And I fixed your poem because it didn't rhyme. And then they'll send this back to the supporter, who gets an email, and then when they go back to the form, they can see that the name was rejected because Chris's red beak card is a dumb name, and that the poem's been fixed. And so they resubmit again, saying, okay, here's a real name. Let's call it, the Crimson Beak, for example.
Uh-huh.
And then I like your poem, so I'll accept that. And then this goes back and forth a bunch until eventually the supporter and GGG are happy with it. At that point, it then gets passed on to our artists, and our artists make art for it, where the supporter technically does not get the ability to approve the art because that's a crazy process. So we make the art, and in general, the supporters are very happy with it because our artists are excellent. But this then gets added to the game in an appropriate area at an appropriate drop rate that the supporter also doesn't get to influence. And so while we listen when supporters have significant concerns about it, the goal is that they pick the flavor text, the name, and the item, and then we sort the rest of it out to be whatever's good for the game. And it's generally something we're willing to work with people on, but that's the way the process works. And we're happy to continue doing this for the future, especially because we keep adding new types of items. So for example, divination cards that add, like a Stygian Vice, for example. I don't know, if anyone submitted one of those, but that's the kind of thing that they can do in response to us releasing new content.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm not too familiar with the process. I literally just finished thinking up what I want from my divination card and sent it in. So very excited to see how that turns out. And is there any new things like that coming in supporter packs, like where you can influence the game?
We've talked about crazy things you can do to influence the game in the past. Like, we've had discussions that would change Path of Exile fundamentally. Like, as an example, wouldn't it be cool if, this is when we were doing the Labyrinth stuff, wouldn't it be cool if there was like a Labyrinth room editor where you can set up traps and stuff and, triggers and switches and that, and make a room that another player has to play through? And you can like hide the chest that has the prizes in it and stuff. And then there's an area which connects a whole bunch of these together. So you're playing through other rooms that people made, for example. And that's an awesome idea, maybe, but requires like making a complicated editor and having a system for uploading these and having a system for people checking it and ongoing balance and making sure it works. And that's cool, but we make more money just releasing high quality game content and normal supporter packs. Like the $60 pack makes so much more money than $1,000 packs used to, because lots of people buy the $60 pack and a handful of people buy the $1,000 pack. So making exclusive content reserved for just the highest supporters isn't the best financial decision for us. And it's also that it's already hard. Like divination cards, we put effort into making sure it was a good process, and it was still very difficult. If we think of a good idea in the future, we'll jump on it because we like the idea of the community stamping themselves into the game. And it's more about that than it is about the additional money.
Right. And like a previous one was Hologram Masters, and people are still putting in heroes or exiles into the Hologram Masters, right?
Yes, that's correct. And that's an example of where, so at the time we made money by having the Hologram Masters be a component of the top tier pack. We would have still sold a lot of the top tier pack even if it didn't have that, because people like having the top tier thing and there's other value in there. Like you get points up to the value of the pack, for example. But some of that came from the Hologram Masters. But since then, we've had several years of having to maintain it and many different passes of sitting down and changing how it works and trying to get the load times lower. And there's a ton of work required to maintain this old content, and not to mention the fact that this is stamping in the balance values of people's Grandmasters years ago. And whenever we refactor something in the game, like let's say we dramatically change how charges work in a way which breaks all the Grandmasters, well, now we've got to sit there for a week and fix all the Grandmasters, and it becomes a really big maintenance thing. Now, we don't regret adding it because it's a cool part of the game, but we just have to be really careful if we're maintaining this game for, a decade or longer still, to make sure that the content we're adding is worth the effort in the very long term.
That's really cool. I'm looking forward to see what sort of high supporter packs and stuff will be added to the game. Speaking of base types, what about base types that aren't in the game yet? Like, there's no guns, there's no spears in the game. Like, are we going to see more base types?
So we try really hard to keep gunpowder out of Rayclast, so much so that when we got the ship that takes you back to Act 6 and it had cannons on it, we took the cannons off and put crossbows there. So I'm not sure that you should expect guns in the near future. People have experimented with stuff like crossbows and spears. There's obviously a push internally to try to do that kind of stuff, and we haven't found a releasable way to do that yet. Maybe in the future. I mean, without a doubt, there will be new item types. Like, I'm not saying no to that. It's just that, there are reasons why they haven't been released yet. And it's partly because, like, swords are the same as axes, except they look a little different and various skills work with them versus don't. So if we said, okay, look, there's spears, all the regular skills work and they're kind of the same thing, just a damage stick, people would be incredibly underwhelmed by that. They want, like, a spear class to go with it. They want, 15 dedicated spear skills and a spear ascendancy and, like, there's going to be a significant expectation that that item type is suddenly special when none of the other ones in the game are.
Right.
And so that's something we have to get around. Now, maybe it can be done with a massive item type refactor where we give everything new personality and make a ton of skills that are item class specific and so on and so on. But that's the decision of when we're looking at future expansions. We have to weigh that versus other stuff. And of course, there are drawbacks off the top of my head. Whenever we make skills that are just for one type of item, people complain. They wanted to work with unarmed. They wanted to also work with maces. You get the idea. So there's kind of a drift towards us opening skills up rather than restricting them.
And is there any special reason why we don't have pants?
I believe that in Rayclast there are no horses, and pants were developed to stop chafing when you're riding a horse. And so, anyway, that was just a side story. But this actually meant that we renamed some items to get rid of horse references, and that the saddles referenced rowers where you don't need pants.
All right.
Anyway, this is all a quirk of the fact that the original Templar model didn't have pants, and I believe that when Eric is rearranging the the new character class models, that this problem is rectified. I'm kind of sad to see the meme go though. Like at the point where people have pants, that's one of Path of Exile's characteristic things just crossed off, and I don't know that that's necessarily good for the community, but there's a loose promise of pants coming in the future.
Oh, wait, well, as an actual slot.
Well, not as a slot. I'm talking entirely thematically here. As a
Okay.
slot, like, okay, so I have a couple of comments about a slot. The first one was said by, I think, Penny Arcade, is that like magic pants is kind of a pathetic concept, if you see what I mean. Like, an adventurer doesn't go through a dungeon, kill a dragon, open the treasure chest to find enchanted trousers.
Okay, that's fair. I like
They
that.
they want axes and amulets and helmets and
Right.
crowns. Additionally, we don't like adding new slots because that causes mod dilution. Our goal with having fewer slots is to have it that the mods that you get are as meaningful as possible. So if you compare it to some of those MMOs that have like 10 more slots than we do, you can take an item on and off and you can't even tell from your character's speed at killing monsters and surviving that the item is there. We wanted in Path of Exile that if you pull an item off, you're missing something and then you die. So we're probably not going to add a pants slot for that reason.
Yeah, it was, somebody was actually asking about it today, and I thought it was pretty cool thing to bring up. Um, Another like item design thing I was wondering about was, for example, not being able to shield charge with a wand. Is there like a special reason? Like that's something I as a streamer get asked a lot about. Like, why can't I shield charge?
I honestly have no idea. It's not something I was aware of or have any involvement in, so I'll talk to the team. I mean, it's just that was decided and then that was maintained, and they probably have good reasons, or it's an oversight, but in either case, I'll ask them.
Oh.
It's certainly part of the meta, though, right? Like, it's one of those things where if we fix it because, oh, I guess that's weird, then suddenly it might completely change. We could get hate mail for someone's just developed a, non-wand shield charger, and suddenly they could have used a wand all along, and, it can matter for people.
No, for sure. Are there any items like base types or uniques or whatever that you would want in the game in the future? Like, for example, crossbows.
I think crossbows would be cool, but they suffer the same problem as other new weapon types where. So, okay, let's talk about crossbows for a second. So crossbows are very powerful bows that you load with both hands, and they are significantly more punchy than a bow because they've got this, much more powerful mechanism. So they're slower and they do more damage. If we added that in the game as a two-hand bow that's slow, that does more damage with a larger strength component, is that really helping anyone? I mean, it'll look cool for someone to fire a crossbow, but people don't like slower stuff. Whenever we add weapons that are slower, we get a really bad backlash. And so the only way to do crossbows in a way that, doesn't generate people hating them is for us to have kind of like pistol crossbows that automatically reload and they're basically guns and you dual wield them and that kind of stuff. But that's not really what Rayclust is about, running around with pseudo guns in your hands. It's the kind of thing where a slow crossbow could make sense, but the community wouldn't enjoy as much. And so I mean, this is based entirely on my opinion. I haven't talked to the guys who work on items. They probably have their own plans. But I feel that if we found a way of coping with the fact that crossbows implicitly are different than bows in a way that, makes them interesting, then we're more likely to add them.
That was interesting. I was, yeah. Well, that pretty much concludes the item design. Let's move on to your own experiences playing Path of Exile.
Sure.
So you've been playing now, and you mostly play hardcore. How do you personally feel like the difference between hardcore versus softcore?
Well, it's a matter of like having to be vigilant the whole time and your decisions mattering a lot. There's situations in hardcore where I'll see a monster that I know I probably shouldn't fight, and then I have to make the decision: do I greedily fight it to get the items or the challenge or whatever I'm going for, or do I not fight it and definitely survive this map? And then sometimes you get incredibly close calls against those monsters, and sometimes they'll kill you. And you think that was literally me making a risk-reward decision and choosing the wrong option. And that feels good because it's teaching you something about the game for next time. As a side note with hardcore, I want to stress the fact that just because I personally like hardcore, it doesn't mean that players need to play it. And this is something we worked very hard on over the years, where for a long time when Creparian was streaming, there was an atmosphere of if you're not playing hardcore, you're a scrub. And this was incredibly damaging to the game. It meant that there was a lot of abuse going on between players that was unacceptable, and there were people who just didn't play because they couldn't play hardcore, and so on. And so we've made a lot of steps, such as having hardcore players not go to the standard challenge league when they die, and having it so that the challenges are unified and easier to do on standard, and so on, so that people can just play standard and not feel bad about it, right? If you're a standard Path of Exile player and you're good, that's awesome, right? There's nothing more to want. Just play hardcore if you have a good internet connection and really like adrenaline, the kind of person who skydives as a hobby and so on.
Yeah.
And so that's something we've been trying to achieve, and I think we've been mostly successful. But I do want to mention before I preach about how amazing hardcore is, that doesn't mean that people can't enjoy Path of Exile to its fullest if they're playing in the standard leagues.
And the decision to like make, because hardcore and Path of Exile is different than a lot of other games, which I always found surprising. What was the design idea behind your character still being playable or like being transferred to standard instead of being unplayable like other ARPGs have?
So this is rooted back in when we wanted people to play hardcore because we want to encourage people to experience the game that way, which is kind of a different philosophy, where if the character is permadeath, then it means that people won't choose to play it because they could lose their character. Whereas if you get the character in standard afterwards, and this is back when there was just standard and hardcore without the challenge league, so it's subtly different, then there's no harm in trying to play hardcore until you die. It's like there's no harm in playing solo self-found. Because currently we're encouraging solo self-found by saying you can play there until the point where you want to trade, then you can conveniently move back to normal and carry on as though there was no difference. And there is no difference. And the same was true for hardcore back in the day. You play hardcore, and then when you die, you go to standard, and everything is exactly the same. If you're missing the items in your stash, just bring them back across like you can in solo self-found. And so this is our way of encouraging people to try something because there's no drawback. Now that people have tried hardcore and it's definitely got its place in the community, there's no need for us to have the characters move to the standard challenge league. And so this creates an awesome situation where you still get access to see your character and stuff, but it's essentially dead as far as you're concerned if you care about the current challenge league. Like my standard characters that came from hardcore are meaningless to me. They're just a marker of the fact I got to that level and then died. They're like a ladder entry or a place I can see my items. I'm never going to actually play them again. And so it's as good as permadeath without actually being the customer support issue that permadeath is.
And do you prefer like the hardcore economy versus softcore economy, or like I don't know how much you trade when you're actually playing?
I don't know enough about the standard economy to be able to comment on it, but the hardcore one seems fine. I mean, I can trade whenever I need to, and it seems to be functioning as an economy, so I don't have any problems with that. And I don't know what the differences are in standard myself. I mean, we have team members that go home and literally spend 8 hours every single day playing a combination of both leagues, and they know and make these decisions much more than I do, where I'm lucky if I get to 90 this league, that'll be my highest level character on a live realm, which will be an achievement for me.
Oh, nice. And so about you playing, like what would be your favorite play style? Like what like class and stuff is your favorite?
That's interesting. So I generally try out experimental builds while we're working on the skills. So for example, we were implementing body swap, and I had a press tour coming up where I had to go and demonstrate body swap to journalists. And so I spent quite a bit of time playing around on the test characters to figure out fun ways for body swap to be played, and occasionally give feedback and stuff on it. And that kind of satiated my build design interest in that particular skill because I had a chance to play with it while we were developing it. And so whenever I play on the leagues, on the live realm, I try very hard to play a character that's durable because I'm playing hardcore. And so I normally gravitate to Marauders, currently Juggernaut, and I'm using Molten Strike and Ancestral Call rather than Cyclone this league. But the goal there is looking for something that's just really tanky, somewhat okay at killing, and then can accumulate currency so I can play a more experimental character as my second one.
And do you do bosses at all? Like what's the highest boss you've been able to kill?
I've got up to tier 8 maps so far, so I'm around there, and the bosses haven't been a big problem. I mean, I've been told that when you get to the map versions of the gods, things start to get really scary in hardcore, so I haven't had any like that. But I mean, there are super hard bosses. I don't skip them, right? Like I'll play through and make sure I finish the boss because I need the Atlas achievement for it. It's just a question of whether I do that while it's twinned or not. And what is awesome, the reason why Path of Exile is fun to play is you'll figure, okay, I want to do a twinned map, so you'll get it all set up, and you don't want to waste too much currency rolling it, so you end up with a couple of extra damage mods that are going to be scary. And so you play through the map, and it's only when you hit the twinned boss do you realize that it's actually a shaper map, and you're going to get an Agent of the Void or whatever in there with you at the same time. And so your plan of, I can deal with these two bosses, I know exactly what's happening here, suddenly becomes thrown out the window because there's this extra dude in there causing problems. And that kind of like levels of layered randomness on top of each other is what I really enjoy about playing.
What about Adziri, Elder, Shaper, stuff like that?
I've never been high enough on the live realm to play Shaper on a legitimate character.
Oh,
I'm hoping to kill Elder, hopefully in the near future. I'm getting some decent Elder influence on my Atlas, so that's coming up. And I've never played against Zeri on the live realm. I mean, countless times on our testing servers to
yeah.
check out content and so on, but not with a character I've played from level 1 all the way up on the production servers.
Hmm. Well, which would be your favorite boss out of all the ones you've tried on like the test server?
That's tough to say. I really like the Katava fight, honestly. Like the Act 10 Katava fight, I think is a great combination of well-signaled dangerous mechanics and just gear check kind of the heart stages. Like you have to be able to fight regularly to pass the heart stuff, but you also have to be able to show mastery of learning how bosses work to fight against the non-heart stages of Katava.
Hmm. Has there been a lot of like when you're like testing something? Has there been any or a lot where you could like get one shot and you just look at the person who designed it and you're like, yeah, this is too hard.
The people who work on it balance wise like that aren't me, thankfully. So they do a ton of that where they play it and balance it dozens and dozens of times. I very rarely give feedback, and when I do give feedback, people have to understand that it's just one player's feedback.
Hmm.
Like fighting a boss, I am no different than the rest of the community. Doing item design or something which I care deeply about and have worked on for a decade, people listen to me and do what I say. So with bosses and that kind of stuff, I'm just giving the feedback just by the way, casually, just so you know I kept dying on the stage. And they say, okay, yeah, I've heard that a few times, and then they make a change. I never definitively tell someone what to do with a boss fight because that's not my area at all.
Well, that's I'm looking forward to you being able to like design more items and design more in the game, so that's pretty cool. Um, do you have a least favorite act? We talked about favorite act earlier.
I feel that Acts 1 and 2 and the first half of 3 are becoming a bit of a chore because they've been the same for so many years now. And so that's, I mean, it's no secret that we're gradually working on renovating these. You notice the water and the rocks and stuff in Act 1 have been gradually getting better. And there's cool stuff underway for bits and pieces of the other acts. So we're making them look better, which will be nice, and we're also looking at ways that we can tighten them up and make them more fun to play and just rejuvenate their design and so on. So there's no this isn't a grand unveiling of look new acts and that's the expansion. It's more a matter of in patches every now and then you'll notice improvements until eventually it's changed completely within a few years. So I would say that the older content I am less happy with at the moment.
Okay. And as for playing, something I'm very curious with, do you log out when you play?
Sorry, could you repeat? I missed the
Do
question.
you log out when you play? Like, say your character's about to die, but you know you can save it by logging out.
So the answer is yes, but this league I haven't needed to yet, and that's partly because I'm playing an insanely tanky character where, if I'm finding there's spikes of damage, then I can politely walk away and open a portal. But I absolutely will log out if I see my life drop to 30%. It's just that that hasn't happened so far this league. And this is an intentional thing where there are two ways you can balance the game. The first way is where you actually get damage swings that are meaningful, and in that case, you could be killed in a couple of seconds. And so logging out is a way of avoiding that. Or you can say, look, guys, logging out's cheesy, so we're adding like a 5 second period where if you try to log out, you're still in the game while taking damage for 5 seconds. And the game would be 100% different end to end if that was the
Right.
case. Like that will never happen to Path of Exile because of the amount of work required. It would mean so much of a rebalance. We'd be sent back to the Dark Ages, and the entire hardcore community who may be complaining about logouts would still quit when that change is made. So anyway, it is very, like, put it this way. I was playing recently when I was getting rolling power outages at my house, right? Like there was some bad storm despite it being summer. And I really wanted to hit 88. Like I was, 6% away from the level. So I have to gain 6% of the X, knowing that 5 times in the last hour my power has gone out. When the power goes out, I'm going to be in game for 6 seconds, exposed to whatever I'm fighting, right? So I'm trying to level a maps knowing that I have to tank 6 seconds of not being able to actively leech or cast Enduring Cry or anything in order to get out of combat. And that was a crazy experience. I had to be so careful, and I went on low tier maps and they were dangerous. So I abandoned 5 or 6 maps, and I eventually got the experience. And it took like several hours, and there weren't any power outages during that time, but it was a horrific, scary experience. And every moment of Path of Exile would be like that if, upon being disconnected and choosing to log out, like there's nothing you can do about it, you're taking 5 or 6 seconds of damage,
Right.
means that you will lose characters in a way that just feels unfair. And so, anyway, enough ranting. Lockouts is a part of the way the game works, and it's easy to do. You press Alt F4, or you exit a character screen, or whatever your preferred method is.
And obviously, a lot of people are, whether they like it or not, a lot of people don't like the logout macro. Is that something you've thought about putting in the game?
I kind of think it would be fine to have a key you can press that does everything that one of their macros does. I mean, it's not hard to add necessarily. So sure, it's kind of one of those things that we probably should do in the future, but haven't yet got around to it because it means distracting people from useful stuff they're doing.
Oh, I think a lot of people will be happy to hear that. Um, Continuing with the your experiences playing PoE, do you have a favorite PoE moment? Like, for example, defeating a boss that was really hard, something chancing a unique or dropping a really big unique?
Uh, every moment that I found a Belly of the Beast has been really good. Um, I remember getting to Merciless Hillock and having some significant problems with, the start of Merciless, the damage I'm taking from Sam Spitters and stuff. This is back in Talisman, and then thinking I really need to do something when I get to town about my life, and then Hillock drops a belly. That was good.
Wow.
So, there's most of the good moments are associated with rolling or finding good items, and there's crazy stories involving bosses and stuff, right? Like I have this philosophy that if I'm playing a Beyond map and I spawn in a unique Beyond monster, I'm not just going to quit. I'm going to go and like try to fight it, and if I can't fight it, I'll hide it somewhere in the map and then finish the rest of it. And so, hiding Hast is what I think of as Beyond. Anyway, there's so many good memories associated with playing the harder content in the game. Like my current nemesis at the moment is that stupid Flame Blast Exile, right? Like the one
Ah,
that you're playing, and then suddenly the red circle appears around you, and you're thinking, "What? He's on this map as well." And then you're about to get crit for most of your life, and it it's just a lot of fun because there are so many surprise things that you kind of know can happen. Once you reach the skill with the game that you understand there's dangerous stuff out there, you live in fear of it, but it still happens to you every now and then.
yeah. Has there ever been a moment like that where you're kind of like, oh, why is this in the game? Like you're kind of annoyed about it because it one shot you or something like that?
I got killed very rapidly in a village ruin Zana map back in Talisman, the death that people keep making fun of because there was like triple dipping with the puncture that the bosses
Yeah.
applied. Because I was in like a vulnerability map and there was some other thing, and it got me in like a second, and I did wonder, well, how is that possible? But when I spoke to people, I said, don't just nerf this in response. Like it's not like Chris dies then 3 hours later nerfed. You have to like if you want to nerf this, wait a long time. And then I honestly thought they weren't going to until quite some time later. There were balance changes to it.
Yeah, that was my first death as a streamer was the same thing. Pretty painful.
Yeah, but
Um,
the nice thing is that the deaths do make sense numerically. Like the detonate dead deaths, like the famous crypt one, for example, with Lyra, for example,
hmm,
those kind of things. When someone says, "How did I die?" and then they work it out afterwards, and it makes sense, and now they know for next time, and the
yeah.
community says, "Well, that's cool." Those are good moments.
Do you have a like, or I was about to ask, do you have a worst character rip? But was the bleed one your worst character rip then?
Well, okay, so my most embarrassing character rip was that I was up to Merciless Piety, which shouldn't be a particularly hard fight, and my lightning resist is sitting at around 20% because I was lazy. And of course, I learned from this. And I got 20% lightning resist, and I think, what does Piety do? Well, she's got her fire form and she's got her cold form, and my resists are capped on those. And I can't remember if she does lightning. She probably does lightning, some like melee attack. I don't know. I can't remember. It's been a while. Yeah, I'll just bring a topaz flask. So I fight Piety, and I'm dead within 1 second of her casting a lightning attack, like way before I can react to the topaz flask. And I learned from that. Always cap your resists the second
Yeah.
you enter merciless. And so that was kind of the worst. Like I know to cap resist. I've been capping resist since I was 16 in other games. It's just a matter of actually not being lazy when playing Path of Exile.
Well, to finish off your experiences playing PoE, I think you guys talked about you streaming Path of Exile at one point. What did I imagine that, or did that not happen?
We did discuss it, but I never really got a good time to do so because I keep getting interrupted while playing. Like there are a lot of people who will message me constantly with, "Hey, on the Taiwan realm, there's this thing happening where blah," and then I have to quickly look into it. And most of the
Right.
time, it doesn't take a lot of time, but we'll put it this way: there's already messages accumulating while I'm talking to you, and while none of them look particularly urgent, there's certainly some stuff to follow up on afterwards, if you see what I mean. So
Right.
it is tricky to do a good job of playing for a few hours uninterrupted while streaming. The stream would be more a matter of what it's like to run PoE operations, I'm sure. It'll be like me streaming my desktop going, okay, guys, now that this one's a false alarm, we're good. Okay, no, Frankfurt's dropped out again. Okay, I'll post on Reddit and say we know about it. This kind of stuff.
Well, is that something you see yourself ever having time for again? Like, so we can watch you play the game, or?
I don't know really. It would be fun to do it occasionally, but I suspect it would be more of a special thing where I set aside a couple of hours. The other thing is that, I mean, I'm just a regular player playing Path of Exile. I have some inside info from, knowing how things work, but the top players know more and play better than I do. It's just that I happen to be, running the company at the same time.
Cool. Well, that's a good time to move on to the future of Path of Exile. It's the next topic. So currently we have 10 acts. Are there going to be more acts? Like 1 to 10, will there be an 11 is what I'm asking.
Do you feel that there needs to be more acts? I mean, sure, more is better,
I
but
don't.
how, like let's say we announce, okay, there's acts 11 to 13 that you've got to play through before maps. Isn't that just more work before you get to the Atlas?
Yeah, but well, when I think a new act, I think of it as an alternative endgame.
Yep. Well, alternative endgames are totally awesome. I mean, without a doubt, in the next decade of Path of Exile updates, we will have to add tons more content. We're not like drawing the line and saying it's just leagues from now on. There's new stuff, but the question of are there new acts really depends on what the right number of acts is, and 10 might be okay for the time being. Maybe the new content comes in other places in the game. And I'm saying this speculatively because we don't have a firm plan for anything beyond the next few expansions, and those, we can't talk about, but aren't entire new acts at this stage.
And have you guys ever talked about different arcs? So, for example, what I mean by that is instead of the current Act 1 to 10, maybe a separate Act 1 to 10 that the player can choose.
Yes, that has been discussed, and it's very expensive. Like making 10 acts is quite an undertaking, put it that way. So we have discussed interesting bits and pieces. It's just a question of making sure it has the most impact for the players. It's not, if we release it and it isn't really something people play through more than one time, that's kind of a problem. It has to be something that affects the end game so that the content goes into the variety of stuff people are repeating there.
So what are we looking at for the immediate future of Path of Exile? Are we looking at more endgame or?
So obviously I can't give too much specifics, but we have a league coming up in March, which is the 3.2.0 release, and that, like all leagues, will affect the core game and the end game, and this is coming out alongside other improvements that people have been asking for, as well as some other interesting bits and pieces. I'm being super vague, but like earlier I mentioned, for example, Ascendancy reworks. That's the kind of thing that we're putting in there, and there's probably new skills and so on. So the goal of a release like that is keep the game fresh, add a new league. It's a great opportunity to play Path of Exile through again. And in a way, those kind of league releases are pseudo expansions unto themselves. I mean, if we called the league an expansion, the only difference is whether it affects standard or not.
Right.
So, these leagues have voice acting and story and blah, blah, blah. So there's that scheduled for March, and then scheduled for June is a larger expansion. Probably not that much larger. Like, you could think of these two as kind of the same size because they both take about the same amount of time and have the same team and so on. It's just that this one's technically labeled an expansion because the content affects standard and is sticking around beyond the length of the league. And of course that one comes with another league. And me using the word beyond there is not a clue. It's just an English word. So these things do definitely affect the end game, and they do definitely affect the core game. At this stage, we do not have a 100% revamp the end game again expansion lined up immediately because we've just done the most recent Atlas rework. But neither are we planning to 100% revamp the 10 acts. We get an opportunity, thankfully, to have some breathing room and to fix Path of Exile in other ways that I think the players will enjoy.
That's really exciting to hear. Before we move on to the second set of topics, I was wondering, the guild system, is that something we can see some improvements on in the near future?
This is frequently asked, and there are separate things we're working on for guilds. We actually have some experimental stuff underway for how guilds work on the Chinese realm related to the process of joining guilds. And I don't know how much I can talk about there because I don't know what's been announced on the Chinese server, but there's some cool QOL stuff and making the whole process a lot more interesting. Now, we don't know if we're bringing that over to the Western server. We can do if people like it, but joining guilds may not be the problem at the moment. There are other things like membership roles and stuff like that. One pet peeve that I have that I really want to address is guild stash tab stuff. And I don't just say this because I like selling stash tabs, but there's some serious QOL we need to get into there in terms of being able to move them around and discussing porting across all of the other stash tab types. So guilds can have map stashes and currency tabs and fragment tabs and all of that kind of stuff alongside the current types. In addition, there's the ongoing question of what do you do about guild theft? How do you make a log of the items? And unfortunately, there's no good solution to the theft issue other than the big solution. And the big solution is a very complicated database that stores all of the actions, that lets you browse through many pages and filter and sort and all of that kind of stuff. Because if you just say, I'm going to show the last 50 actions, then someone, well, put it this way, your last 50 actions are someone putting a scroll of wisdom in and out and hiding who it was who actually stole the items. So it's important to have if we're doing the logging thing, to do a very complicated solution to that. And that's why that kind of thing is taking some time.
Well, that's Very, very good news. I mean, obviously, or something I would really want would be more slots for the guild. Right now, it's capped at 250. So, yeah, I'm personally hoping for.
The reason why there's a cap there is because whenever someone in a guild does something, it has to tell everyone else in the guild about it, right? So let's say there are 1 million people in your guild. Well, then it has to tell 1 million people, and that's going to freeze everything up. Like it will literally sit there trying to send data to 1 million people, and everything gets full, and it's just it's not going to work very well. And so that's why architecture-wise, we're comfortable with 250 people. And it's the same thing for friends lists and ignore lists, where if we just start bumping it up, we'll find out we bumped it up too much, and then it's too late, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
Like we could probably bump guilds to 300 overnight and there would be no problem. But what if there is like 350? Maybe that's where the problem comes in. And so we have to do very careful load testing on dedicated servers to make sure that we've properly tested it with real player numbers before we just arbitrarily bump it up.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, especially when they cost money to buy. It's very hard to say, oh, you know those tabs you bought. Sorry about that. Yeah. That was the first 6 topics completed. We're now going to be moving on to the next ones. So
these are the fun ones, right? These are the ones that Reddit thought you wouldn't be allowed to ask.
Yeah, basically, I did.
But when you asked, I said ask any, right?
Yeah, no, so for those of you watching as well, all of these topics they haven't been suggested by Chris. This is all stuff I asked, and he said no to none of them. So they are on the screen now. We are opening with the 6-second DC timer, which we talked about earlier. Can it be adjustable? And yeah, can it be adjustable?
So there are 2 aspects to this. The first one is that yes, it could be made to be adjustable, right? Like all it involves doing is communicating a new number to the server, which remembers that's your setting, and we add a slider for it. And it's not too hard, right? Like that's, a few days of work and testing. And, if we had to have it in by next Friday, it could be done. It's just that the second problem is larger. And the second problem is that people aggressively set their settings to whatever they feel will help them the most, even if it hurts them, right? Like an example is the potato graphics quality stuff. Did you know that once you set that past like 3, it's really not having very much impact? All it does is it reduces RAM use. It doesn't actually save frame rate stuff. It just causes it to sample different MIP levels from the textures, making the game more brown. And setting it to 5 saves like half a meg of RAM or whatever. But people will do so and then happily stream the game looking worse than 2007 RuneScape. Right. And the same thing is true for this thing here, where let's say you can set it down to as low as a 1 second disconnection time, right? So that means if there's no data from you for 1 second, you're going to get bumped. Now, if you have a rock solid like fiber connection to the servers, you will still have 1 second of latency just due to internet dumbness every few hours. Right. And maybe that's okay, well, I'll accept that. I can barely die in hardcore because of the 1 second disconnections, but in return, I'll get randomly kicked occasionally. But when you get randomly kicked, who's getting blamed but GGG? Like, it's what? I just disconnected. Oh my God, like, did the server crash? What happened? When you're in the middle of a map that you've paid a lot of currency for and you can't get back in or whatever, like, it's going to be super annoying. But on average, people have much worse connections than, single 1 second lag spikes. There are people out there who are getting hit by the 6 second thing just due to the internet being crappy where they are. And this happens like people in California when they have bad ISPs, people in Europe, a lot of German users are just having, and not to mention Brazil recently, where there are problems with ISPs where they're just trying to solve them and there's huge lag spikes. And so we feel that if we set this to lower, it would cause the game to be almost unplayable to people that blindly turned the setting down, if you see what I mean. And maybe there's a solution where we learn what the appropriate setting is for the user's conditions, like we sample their latency and determine eventually that, it's safe for it to be reduced, or do some fancy solution like that, where the user can't set it, we just drift it downwards for the people that have good internet connections. That might work okay. But realistically, having it be lower means a lot more disconnections for people and almost unplayable for the people that actually get these long lag spikes without realizing it.
Well, I mean, obviously, this is something that frustrates me a lot as well, because, or especially as a hardcore player, and then you see a couple of streamers, like, for example, Rise QT, might have like 2 to 5 deaths per league due to the 6 second DC timer. So if I was going to put it in, it would be something in a config file where somebody that doesn't know what they're doing aren't going to accidentally find it and set it to 1 or 2 seconds. Then it's strictly going to be somebody with like that actually knows what they're doing and will experiment with it. Then you're not going to have that problem of somebody accidentally setting it to 1 and emailing support asking, why am I DCing all the time?
So I agree that rules out the people who just blindly look in the settings, but there are still going to be people who read a guide online about how the correct way to fix your problem is to set this. Like, people apply the weirdest stuff when they really don't know what they're doing because someone on Reddit said it will help them. Like, we see people we see people doing stuff that will actively hurt their experience because it sounds like a cool comment which fixes it. You know, someone posts a PSA, just do this, and then everyone applies it blindly. And so I I mean, I'm pretty sure that if we put it in the config file, people would still apply it when it's inappropriate for them. And I don't have a good solution to that. Now, maybe we just do it and they've ruined their gaming experience and it's their fault, but that's not a really very good conclusion to their Path of Exile playing, if you know what I mean. And I call it a conclusion because they're going to get disconnected so much that it will cause anger. So, I'd like to resolve this. We just need a more intelligent way of making sure it's just applied to users where it's appropriate.
Yeah, it is definitely pretty hard. But yeah, I'm hoping that's something that'll be in the game. It's one of the more frustrating deaths, at least.
Yeah, I understand. But the thing is, would you trade that frustrating death for a lot of frustrating disconnections? Because it could happen.
Well, that's the thing, though. Like especially if it's something that's in the config, if I do start getting a lot of disconnections, I move it back up to 6, right, or 5.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, the end solution is people should aim to have the most stable internet they can do. And there are various solutions to this, like paying for better internet or potentially using a VPN that has a more stable path to the servers. But I do want to get this setting in. I'm just thinking that like maybe the best kind of solution, and this is probably too complicated for what we do, but thinking out loud is something along the lines of you set it to a number and it doesn't do that yet. It merely records how many disconnections you would have on that number. Like it'll say to you, for example, okay, you set it to 1 second. Well, that would have disconnected you 122 times in the last day. Are you actually happy with that? You know, and this kind of thing where there's a process for the user actually seeing what impact it will have before they use it.
Yeah.
But that's complicated. I mean,
that's a great idea.
it's subtly like 1 second is basically impossible, even for people who claim their internet connection is rock solid, because stuff happens. A router reboots and it has to path around it to another one, and this is just uncontrollable. And there are so many ISPs in the way, and we're seeing substantially longer. Like the 6 second thing is still catching a lot of users out because 6 second lag spikes are just an unfortunate reality of the internet these days.
Well, actually, no, that's a great idea. Like a setting that wouldn't go in effect for until like a day later. So say you try to set it to 3, it would like check and say that, okay, well, they wouldn't actually disconnect any in a day on 3 seconds, and then it goes in effect. That's a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, one way to do that is to have the game always sample how long the lag spikes are, and then it builds a histogram of your lag spikes. And then there's the ability when you go to the secret settings page that lets you change this for you to see, you know, it'll say to you, okay, look, these are your lag spikes. At the setting you have chosen, you're going to get X per hour.
Right.
And then, you know, it can communicate very clearly that you are going to get disconnected quite often. I mean, maybe it'll be fine for some people. There are probably people who live very close to the servers where they're not getting 1 second of lag between them and 2 hops away.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people are happy to hear about that, and that at least it's known, and that people aren't too keen on the 6 seconds at least. That's good for that topic. Next up, we have magic find characters in PoE. So lately, there's a lot of talk about things like Biscos and Sextants and stuff like that. So first, I want to talk about like rarity versus quantity. So obviously, the item quantity gem was removed from the game, but the item rarity gem is still in.
Yes, that's correct.
How is it balanced, like the item rarity versus the item quantity?
Well, item rarity is a lot more harmless because it doesn't actually increase currency. So for example, if you double the item rarity in a world without diminishing returns, you double item rarity, you've now got twice as many uniques, twice as many rares, twice as many magics. Basically, it helps all the good stuff, except you haven't just doubled your rate of currency and other weird stuff like maps, for example. So that's the first thing to consider is we're happy to give out item rarity more often because it has an impact on some of the items you're finding that we're happy for you to find more of without just doubling your currency yield or your map yield.
And what was the decisions behind the removal of the item quantity gem?
It became mandatory. For example, if you measure your map yield, if you measure your time yield as how many items I get for an hour of playing, and 30% increased damage makes you marginally faster, so it increases your item yield by 5% or 10%. Well, the quantity of 30% was certainly a lot more, and so people kind of skipped the process of killing the monsters by making the monsters they currently killed give more items.
Yeah, and by quantity affecting map yield, you mean the item quantity roll on the map, I'm guessing, right? Because there's been a lot of people being worried that wearing quantity gear, or and more importantly wearing Biscos, affects maps.
Bisco's 100% does not affect maps. I know that because I saw the question on the list and specifically checked the code myself and asked people, and I can confirm Bisco's has no effect on maps, which leads to interesting things where someone will write to me and say, hey, look, so I feel the map drops are terrible. I've been finding crappy maps. It's just unsustainable. But then I found a Bisco's and now the game is good. I'm finding enough maps now. When the actual solution is he was unlucky, then he was lucky.
Right.
You know, actually, I want to talk about the map drop rate thing for a sec, because there is a subtle point here that Abyss content doesn't drop maps, right? Like when you fight monsters that come out of an Abyss, you cannot find maps. And this is done on purpose because we found in the past that the League content has been the swingiest thing to affect map drops. Like if there's a League that's relatively gifty with the number of items it gives, like Breach, for example, then that kind of stuff affects map drops far more. And so people's complaints about map drops this League are quite a lot due to the fact that the Abyss content is just extra stuff that isn't dropping maps. And in addition, there's no, Horizon Orbs and that kind of stuff that was introduced in the last League. So by specifically saying League content doesn't yield maps in an attempt to have a more controllable standardized experience, that's a large portion of why players are saying that the maps drop less. I mean, there may also be tweaks to map drops. I'm not aware of any specifics, but it is the bulk of this is due to the fact that the additional League content doesn't drop maps, and that we don't have orbs that manipulate map tiers and so on.
The chests definitely do, though. The Abyss chests 100% drop maps.
Okay, that may be the case, but at least the everyday monsters that come out of it aren't meant to. I mean, I hope I am not wrong here, but this is something that was intended and explained to me this way.
Pretty sure at least the rares do. Same as Breach. Actually, now that you say, I'm not 100% sure that the actual mobs are, but the chests 100% do.
Yeah, it could be that the res do as well, but it's important to note that in terms of just general white monsters, a lot of the ones that you kill in a map do come from abysses when there are abysses present, and in some cases there's 2 or 3 abysses in a map. So it's important that the whites don't count like regular whites for that.
Right. A lot of people are saying white mobs do too, so there might be something different there.
Yeah, I could be wrong. I mean, I investigated this to double check and try to find an explanation for the fact that people are complaining about map drops. But we do hear the complaints, right? It's something that, I mean, on the other hand, the rate of map progression that we've had in past leagues certainly does outstrip what we want from the map system. We do want it so that people have to try difficult content. Having said that, if people are getting frustrated too early, that's a problem as well. So we are keeping an eye on it. We're not saying that it's staying exactly the way it is, but it's working mostly as intended at the moment.
And you were talking a little bit about the item quantity gem being mandatory, and that's why it got removed. But a lot of players right now feel like Biscos is pretty mandatory.
So we looked on the trade sites prior to the interview, and at the time that I checked, there were 8 Biscos available for sale in the standard Abyss League. And so this isn't the case that everyone has a Biscos. It's the case that everyone wants a Biscos and is planning around the ability to get one. And this is the definition of a chase unique, right? This is the thing where if I find a Biscos, my life will change. I can sell it for a ton of exalts. I'll find so many items. It's cool. I'm going to have a great time. I'm looking forward to a Biscos. It's the headhunter's feeling. And we've heard again and again that people want that feeling. They want it so that monsters can drop an item that will totally make their week and make their league. And so that's an important aspect of the item being good. In addition, this item turns off your whole amulet slot functionally in terms of affecting you actually killing monsters, right? It's a significant hit to your character's power to use it. And I understand the top builds can afford to sacrifice that and the items are worth it. But this is creating an interesting situation where you have to ask yourself, can I still hit my life goals, my resist goals, my damage goals while using an amulet that just increases drops? And this is a question that not everyone answers with choosing Biscos. It may be rebalanced in the future, and part of the impression that it's mandatory may come from the fact that there's rumors that it affects map drops. And I'm 100% certain of that not. Like the Abyss thing I may be wrong with, right? The Abyss thing could just be misinformation on my part, but the map stuff I've seen, Biscos does not affect it. So I can confirm that one with clarity.
Yeah, I actually didn't think Biscos affected maps either. It's just pretty big on the currency increase though. Like my problem with Biscos is it doesn't feel great playing the game without it. Is a big problem for me personally.
Right, I see. Well, I mean, this is an ongoing conversation in the office, but it's not bugged, and it is good for there to be choice behind items and for some items to be good. Like, I'm not hating the fact people like the items in the game, if you see what I mean,
right,
and want more of them. I mean, this Biscos itself is saying, I want more items, and that's potentially a good thing. So I can't promise any particular changes, but it honestly makes me happier rather than sad, if you see what I mean.
Speaking of other mandatory items, Sextants as well is something. I mean, obviously they've been changed slightly this league by the positioning of the Atlas, But have you guys talked about sextants a lot, like on the team? Like, is that something that's changing, staying?
I don't know anything about what is going to change, but it's discussed enough to lead me to believe that the team are actively making sure that any problems there are solved. And I understand all the concerns to do with the fact that with the Atlas more dense, the sextants allow really good mod blocking now, and it feels like you set up one map and then repeat that type of map, which is what the War for the Atlas mechanic is meant to stop, and so on and so on. It needs a rework. And I just have no idea what that's going to be because no one's discussed it with me yet, except nodding and saying, can you let us get back to our work, please, so we can actually do it. So I'm sure they'll be communicative, probably through a manifesto post once they've worked out what the solution is here.
Oh, well, that was pretty much all the questions I had for magic finding. That brings us to our next one, which is racing events. Now, for those of you watching and didn't know, like back in the day, there used to be a race league where you would accumulate points and you would get rewards based on those points. And you could also get the demigods, which you've seen now in the later races like Turmoil and Mayhem. Is the race leagues something that is coming back?
So I like races and I like the fact that we can run these seasons. The difficulty is in the past, whenever we started running races, we're kind of saying to the players who are enjoying the current leagues, we're saying to them, here is a tantalizing set of rewards if you engage with this thing that requires quite a lot of wakefulness, right? Like there's races all around the schedule and there's they interrupt whatever you're doing. If you're playing in a mapping group, suddenly you have to stop to play a race for a certain amount of time in one go, and it's relatively tiring. And the question is if the rewards are good or bad. So if the rewards are bad, then what's the point of having the races? Everyone just complains and GGG drop the ball and so on. And if the rewards are good, then of course it's mandatory and you get better currency playing races than you do actually playing the game. And so this is tricky where you have to hit the rewards just right. And that's one of the reasons we switched to using alternate art unique items really early on, because I said to people, these will become valuable. And to some extent, the community didn't buy that initially. But now, like I have alternate art race uniques from the first season that I earned through really shitty race play. I was very bad at it, that are worth 80 plus exalts because, they're just scarce. And that's really cool to see that the prophecy of these alternate art items will become a collector's thing in the future actually came true. And that's a great reason to make them. But preparing a race season takes a ton of work where what we want to do is just say, here's some races, have fun, guys. But we have to incentivize people engaging with the whole season. Otherwise, the tendency drops off. And we have to make all these custom rewards. And we feel that the benefits of just putting the new content in the actual action RPG part of the game often outweighs this. Like, it lets us have better challenge rewards. It lets us have more interesting, uniques with custom art rather than putting them on race rewards and so on. And so that's one of the reasons why we've been shifting away from doing full-on race seasons. The other problem is that the race seasons were honestly having a large impact on player retention, which then affects spending. You start a race season and the player numbers drop off in terms of people playing the main leagues. There's still the same people engaged with the game, but now they're racing and their behavior changes. And in racing, you don't really show off microtransactions, for example. And I'm not saying it's all about the money, but the fact that it was sabotaging the leagues was an issue. And that's why we only run the Mayhems and Turmoils really late in the league, at the point where we've already, a lot of players have already on their break before the next league. So
I think
Sorry,
the big problem with that though is that the characters or when I am playing a race league, it doesn't feel great when the character goes to perma hardcore or perma standard afterwards. If the character went to, or if you were given a choice when the character was finished, like say it was in some sort of stasis, and then you can click migrate to Abyss hardcore or migrate to Abyss, then not only am I racing and competing against other players, I'm also leveling up a new character that I can play with after that race is over.
Yep, that is a kind of good solution that we could do. We would have to be careful to make sure that like the choice of where to go is actually quite a lot of work. Like being able to assume where you want it to go makes it a ton easier to implement. This is one of the things where the UI on the client side for selecting and storing that is 90% of the actual task of doing the migration to the right place. But it could be, if we're doing race improvements, it could be an important thing in there if it incentivizes it. We've still found though that even when we're running like voided events and stuff, where the goal of those is that there's high amounts of immediate fun rather than long-term item reward and character gain, that it causes retention issues on the main leagues. And I think that part of this is finding a way for racing to be a permanent thing that doesn't involve that doesn't involve a specific onerous schedule that tells people right now you have to go and race.
Right.
Like ideas we've discussed in the past are having a race of the day where it's asynchronous. You're not playing exactly at the same time as the other players. You're merely doing today's challenge, which is go and see if you can kill piety in under 90 minutes or whatever. And it's exactly the same experience if you're playing solo. And that way you can just fit it in almost like a daily rather than having to be a thing where it's 3 o'clock. I'm going to, go home from university to go and do this race.
Well, there is a hybrid there as well, where you can have both asynchronous and non-asynchronous racing on the same race, where non-asynchronously, that word, you're racing for the demigods. So say me, Rise, and Crame, for example, start at the same time, well, or like the demigods can only be won by the way the races were before, a normal timer. And then, for example, for the race points, you could start within 24 hours of the race. Somebody that doesn't have time can go like, okay, well, the race started 4 hours ago. I can still race for the points to get X amount of points this season.
Right. I mean, there are several goals of why people race, right? There's the people who just want to take part and get the prizes. They enjoy the idea of playing characters and seeing how far they can get, and they like the idea of accumulating some stuff at the end of the season. And then there are the people that specifically think that they can race faster than others and have a chance at being demi winners. And that's the kind of thing like what the community was doing with the custom races, where it's very entertaining for Twitch views to have it so that people are competing. Like if you take the top 10 races and pit them against each other with some prizes and the rest of the community can't race, that's still an interesting thing where they can back their favorite horse, as it were. And so I kind of view these as two separate challenges. Like the competitive side for the demis and that kind of stuff and for the Twitch views can be handled without too much disruption to the actual core leagues. It's just a matter of us getting a framework in place. And honestly, the community did a great job with that, with the recent set that they were running.
So is that something, for example, Havoc maybe and stuff like that, arranging race leagues, is that something you would want to be more involved with?
We purposefully didn't get involved in them doing that. There were many ways that were discussed of getting involved, but we kept our hands out of it to see how the community would do and what the community would evolve without us biasing it. And also because the second we get involved, there's expectations of it being awesome because, we're suddenly expected to throw our full weight behind it. So like we were asked, for example, can we contribute prizes to it? And one of the issues is we kind of feel that prizes from GGG are kind of a bribe, and bribes are very important to get players to do certain things. But in this case, they should be playing the races for the prestige, if it's this kind of event, and for the Twitch viewership, and people should be watching it, not because of prizes, but because of the fact that it's entertaining, and we wanted to see how that would play out. And as far as we're concerned, it was very successful. So we have discussed, for example, trying to use the custom league system as a way of doing support for racing. The players can start races. You can actually say, okay, the community wants to get together and have this event running. Let's use the custom league system to do that. And the tricky part is just getting that in alongside all of the other things the company is trying to do, right? Like Reddit says, make the skill gems better, revamp all the old ones, redo the ascendancies, a dozen changes to do, and racing is slightly less demanded, but still quite cool. Like it wins a lot of core points and makes some people very happy, but doesn't affect every single player to the extent of some of the things we're doing.
Well, is the custom league something like maybe if it's not ready to go like totally public yet, but is that something that would be interesting to do with community members? Say, for example, Havoc wanted to say like, hey, we want to do like a custom race just for like a Twitch event.
Yeah, it's not too hard to do that if we want to. It's just a matter of us making sure that we're around to provide fixes to it and stuff. Like once it's a mature system, then we can just say, oh, you want to race at 3 a.m. New Zealand time? Sure, it's scheduled, have fun. But in the meantime, it's like us having to have senior people around watching it and expectations of fixing it quickly. And that's difficult because people are very busy. So yeah, I mean, I understand it's mostly excuses from me here, but there is a concerted effort to prioritize stuff going on. And honestly, the races haven't been as prioritized as highly as I would personally like. But I'm also the one making the decision there, so I'm to blame.
That's all right. Something I was wondering about is the race events have also been happening a lot lately. Is that something we can expect more of? Like especially the league starts like slowing down a little bit in the third month, stuff like that?
So one of the reasons we've been running those is because in the lead up to 3.0, as you know, 3.0 was pushing it quite late in the year. We, had Legacy running for ages, and so the events were a great way of filling time. And likewise, the development of War for the Atlas, despite being the fastest expansion we've ever done, was 17 weeks rather than 13, which is our normal league length. So in that case, there was room for a month of events. we're back on track for our current development schedule at the moment. So we can, for example, run our league for the length of time that we would do normally, and then have the next league start without there being room for a month of race events. Now, maybe we fill the last month with races because people want them, or these longer event things that are a week or two. But the problem is that then that's telling people leagues are now only a 2-month thing, and the more signaling there is of that, the shorter leagues are, and people start demanding content 6 times a year rather than 4, and it's already very hard to get content out 4 times a year. So I can't promise that there will be race events before the next league, because the next league is actually on schedule to start at a reasonable time before people get too bored.
The thing is there, though, that you're already providing more content than any other game development studio. So I don't really see that people are going to start demanding it 6 times a year when you're already... Some other studios aren't even doing it once a year.
The players remember how long they played for the previous league and expect to play for that length of time in the next one, if you see what I mean. Like, if after 8 weeks we cut off Abyss and say, oh, that's done, now time to do this other thing, they're going to expect to play the next one for 8 weeks. And I know, I mean, they're not explicitly saying this, right? Like, every person who listens to it says, I don't think that way. But as a herd mentality, this is the kind of thing that we see. And so, I mean, our goal is to run interesting events, but at the moment, the 2 that we have that are ready to go are Mayhem and Turmoil, and people have done those quite a few times. Like some feedback we received was, can we get another new one? And that would be cool. Like, we like the idea of making new races. And there's a subsection of players within our team who are very keen on races, right? They are racers 100% and really want us to spend time doing race content, and they have some amazing ideas. And as soon as we get the time and the scope to do it, there'll be lots of cool stuff coming out of those guys.
As a last topic for the races, what about racing in leagues? So by that I mean more of like the global alerts and possibly like rewards for people hitting like first 100 at Zeri, Shaper, stuff like that.
So I like the competition to do that stuff. We've actually had prizes in the past where we'd give out like the ritual helmets with the Zeri theme in the Sacrifice of the Val League. I think it was the first people to kill at Zeri got that. We had some laptop prizes for first people to do certain things. I think that was killing Merciless Malachi or Matt Malachi or something. There's this kind of stuff, and it's interesting, right? Like, we make some stuff and we release it, but it really just affects a very few people. Like, to some extent, giving it out randomly to anyone who gets over level 40 in a certain time frame makes more people feel special and feel involved. So it's really tough to say how important it is to have the race at the beginning, because there's only really 20 people taking part, and then there's only really 5 people taking part, and then eventually there's 2 people, and everyone else feels upset that they, for whatever reason, like having an exam or having the release be at 11 p.m. European time or whatever it is the thing that caused them to miss out on being able to do this. The internet goes down and they can't patch 8 gig quickly and so on.
Right, but a lot of people enjoy watching it as well, and when there is some hype around it, and especially if there would be more, like say there would not just be the race to 100, but a race to Zeri. There used to be a global message when Azir was slain, wasn't there?
I don't think we've ever explicitly had a message for boss kills being slain in the main leagues. We can turn it on for race events, like there's a thing that lets us enable boss kill messages. Right. But I don't know if we've ever done that at Zeri one. We might have been watching the stream and sent it out manually or something.
Right. Well, I mean, I especially even before I started playing like the racing part of the game, something that was always exciting for me to hardcore or just playing the game in general was the global events, or like seeing the global messages, even if I wasn't participating in them.
Yes.
And if you like put out more messages like Shaper at Zeri for stuff like that, that's at least pretty cool in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's probably worthwhile adding it in. I don't see a problem with that. We have talked about other types of racing. Like, there's an interesting event they run on the Chinese server called Path of Endurance, which is the English translation of the name, which is a event that you do using your league character, where it's kind of like a set of Shaper areas, as in it uses, how there's various areas stuck together with the cool Shaper space stuff around it. And you fight various bosses, like act bosses in a chain, and it's kind of a 1-hour event to measure how far you can get, and it starts to get really, really difficult. So you play through, and if you're just like a level 70 character that's just got to maps or whatever, you can get so far, like 5 levels in or whatever. But if you're a top-end, really, really dedicated player, you might be able to get really deep in it. And I think it drops, I can't remember the exact rules, but there's like guaranteed uniques at certain points and that kind of stuff. And its goal is to say to people, make the best league character you can, because late in the league, we're going to measure you up against other people, and we're going to see who is best at making a character that can clear this content. And it's not something we've done on our server It's something that they requested that we develop because it fits in the way that Chinese players play and so on. But that kind of thing could work quite well where we have optional and occasional challenges for people's league characters to see how well they can handle really hard content.
Can we have that, please?
Maybe have something like that. I mean, that exact one is very much ingrained in the way the Chinese version of the game works, which is quite different. Like, it really is a different game in some ways. And so we can't port that particular one across, but the team have interesting ideas for that kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you can see chat right now, but we're very interested in that. That looks very cool, or sounds very cool.
I like the fact this has been out on their server for like a year or 6 months at least without really chat being aware of it. There's interesting stuff going on with the Chinese version of PoE.
Something that was recently mentioned was the Chinese server having, if you hold Alt down, you can see the roles of items. Is that something? And I think you talked about that was coming to our servers.
Yeah, it's coming in this week's patch, I think.
Oh, okay.
Surprise.
Yeah, I wish I knew earlier. No, that's great.
We developed it for both, but they were running a beta, so it made more sense to slip it in there and get some feedback on it. And that went well. I mean, there's quirks to it. Like, for example, let's say that technically tier 6 life is the highest you can roll on a ring. It will say tier 6, even though it's a tier 1 ring mod, if you see what I mean. There's that kind of stuff, which people have to understand the item system. But it will certainly clear up what's a prefix, what's a suffix, what the ranges are, and exactly what tier number something is.
Huh. Yeah, no, that makes sense that it took a while to get in. I'm very excited that's coming in this week. I mean, obviously I like crafting and stuff, so thank you for leaking that. That's really cool.
It has to be enabled in the options for your character, for your options file. So you go in there and turn on advanced mod information, and then it appears when you press Alt. Otherwise, Alt just does the function. This is so that new players don't get 100% overwhelmed whenever they want to see what the item level or something is.
That's pretty much all for the race season topping stuff like that. And now we're moving on to the final topic, which is multi-threading, optimization challenges, and burning ground. So first off, and this includes me as well. Multi-threading is causing a lot of crashes for people having it on, and it's amazing for FPS. Like, I turn it on and I'm like, wow, the game runs so smooth. But the downside to that, at least for me, is my game crashes like multiple times a day.
That's really interesting. Our stats indicate that the majority of people are using multi-threading, and I was going to say no one, but almost no one is close enough, are encountering crashes due to that. So maybe it's worth us specifically investigating your crashes, because having a user who gets it and can do experiments and stuff is so much more useful than looking at aggregate data.
Right.
Like, if we can look at the crashes related specifically to your client and say, what were you doing at this time? Okay, now turn it off. What happens? And this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It'll help us track it down a lot more, because having an actual person who reports the problem is so much more useful than us looking at the crash dump information and saying, a couple of people have these weird crashes. Right. I don't really know who they are. Like, maybe they're running in a virtual machine on a Mac and who knows what's going on.
Right.
Or maybe they've got some weird CPU. But, if you've got a regular gaming desktop and are willing to work with us, I'm sure we can resolve that. I mean, it's not meant to crash, right? That's not the intention of it.
Oh, definitely happy to help with that. But this is also, like, a lot of my viewers are having... Generally, that will be my go-to. When somebody's saying they're having crashes, I will tell them to turn off multi-threading. Most of them don't have crashes after that. So it's definitely not just me as well. But...
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I just had one of our developers message me saying multi-threading crashes for them. This is something that is not particularly common, though. Like, I spent a bit of time looking at our crash dumps, and there's something going on with your guys' systems that we can hopefully work out what it is and then fix.
Yeah, no, that's great. Really good to hear that, because multi-threading is something I really want to turn on. Like, it's amazing for an FPS boost. It's one of the best things ever added, besides the lockstep. Amazing.
Yes.
The next one is burning ground, and there was a Reddit post that said that it doesn't exist on Xbox.
That's correct. And our intention is that we turn it back on Xbox in a way that causes little impact on performance, and at the same time apply that fix to the PC so that it also has little impact on performance. And I can talk about the history of burning ground if you would like, but essentially there have been improvements to it in the past that have mitigated most of the problem, but in aggregate, when there's a lot of it on the screen, it certainly still has an impact. And our philosophy has been fix it rather than remove it, except where on Xbox we have to remove it. And so we intend to bring it back on Xbox because this is a game mechanic. Like, it's important that, you can we want it to be the same as PC. And so the team have been working on improvements to Burning Ground. And I don't know the exact time frame for when it's getting released, but it's as soon as it's ready, right? Like, I'm not saying this week, but maybe next, right? Like, it's hard to say. And so it'll look different because like it's done in a way which is less laggy. So
Right.
I'm not sure how it will end up looking, but it's using new tech that was actually developed for Abyss and so on, where we have the ability to mold things over the terrain in a much better way. The previous Burning Ground implementation has these little patches of burning because that way they can appear at the right places. And of course, so many little objects with lots of particles wasn't completely fast. And yeah, so it's not just Burning Ground, it's every ground effect is being redone eventually so that it's much more performant. And that will hopefully resolve those complaints from the community.
And something about Burning Ground that's quite surprising to me is why not remove it until there is a fix for it, like you have done with Xbox?
Because the fix is relatively close, and we prefer not to turn game features off unless there's a significant problem with them. And Burning Ground is fine for most people. Like, it causes a very small frame rate drop. On some systems it's larger, and I understand that that's going to be deemed unacceptable. But if we turned everything off that has any impact on frames, there's nothing being drawn. And so the solution here is invest time in getting it fixed properly, and then everything's good. And that's pretty much what we are able to do. So I'm glad I'm able to say to you now there is a good solution for this coming. A month ago, maybe I wouldn't have had anything positive to say and I'd be giving a lot more excuses. But here I can just say, wait a bit and then it will be better.
No, that's really great to hear. Like, I'm very frustrated with Burning Ground, so very good to hear that. And I know a lot of people will be happy to hear that. Um, on optimization changes and changes like that, something I was curious about was why don't you hype up things like the volatile sound? Like, that is huge, but it's not anywhere. Like, there's no post about it.
The volatile what? Sorry, I missed
The
the end of
volatile
that.
sound, like now when a volatile spawns, it's like whoosh, which is
Huh.
huge, and it's a really like cool feature.
I suspect this is because someone says internally, we really need a sound here. And the sound guy's like, oh, yeah, I'll do that. Okay, I've done that. And then the person making the patch is like, there's a whole bunch of stuff to get in. I'll get it all in. And then at no point there did we, as community managers, really consider, hey, they're going to love to hear about that one. It went through the process without drawing any particular attention. And so, yeah, sorry for not signaling that. But there's a lot of bits and pieces that we get in which are just subtle improvements. And that's kind of one of the fun things. Like, I wonder, I'm not saying we're going to drop the idea of patch notes. That's crazy. But I kind of wonder if the game would be better for people to play if they just play the new version and appreciate the fact there's new stuff changed rather than have a, 10,000 word document describing every single minuscule thing.
Right. So I'm guessing that's the same happened to like Necro Vigil was something a lot of players didn't like, and now it's not in the game anymore. And a lot of people didn't realize that until I mentioned it on stream one day. They were like, "Oh yeah, it is gone."
Yeah, it's super hard to get patch notes correct, by the way. Like, the task required to make sure it includes everything is very difficult. Because while people, when they commit work to our repository, do describe it as well as they can do, it often gets undone later and then reintroduced slightly differently, or they're fixing a problem in a technical way. Like, oh, there's an issue where if an object were to delete its parent, then blah, 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 and now that's fixed. Is technically, you can now use blah type of totem to cast this thing. Like, it doesn't explicitly say. And so when the person writing the patch notes is up, they have when they're looking at this, they have to go and find the developer who did it and say, what were you trying to fix there? And they give a technical explanation, and then we go and find a gameplay guy and eventually work out what it is and try to write a patch note up. And it takes 40 minutes, and there's 500 of these. And so it's a bit of a process getting really good patch notes, and it's sometimes easy to miss stuff. Like, if someone says adjusted some item values as their description, knowing that you can just look at the list of what they adjusted to write the patch note, then it's up to the patch note guy to go through and make sure that every single thing is patch noted. And most of it's irrelevant, right? Like, there's so many small tweaks that we just don't bother patch noting because no one's ever going to care. And occasionally a significant change, like a tier of something changing, gets lumped in with that or just overlooked literally.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And something I wondered about as well is how is it decided when something's kept in the game or what has to go? Like, for example, Necrovigil, Phylacteral Link, stuff like that.
As you know from the years, we err on the side of keeping hard stuff in the game, right? If we took something out the second someone complained, the game wouldn't have its charm and its slightly, sharp side to it. And so it's pretty much a matter of between leagues, we have a good look at something in aggregate and say, right, we've got past the initial backlash time. We've had a whole league of this. How did it actually go? Do we as players feel it's better to be not in there? And as you know, we do remove stuff, right? I mean, the stuff goes eventually. It's just a matter of having a long, hard look at it after it's been there for long enough.
Yeah. Another thing similar is volatile. Why is it only fire now? Because it used to be in all elemental types, but now it's only fire.
I have no idea. It's a good question. Maybe to keep it simple. Maybe because we're planning on rolling out the other ones in the future. I'm not sure.
Okay. That was pretty much all the questions we had. I actually forgot to ask something under item design, which I wanted to ask.
Sure, let's go back and do it.
When you find a unique, you can currently see the art. Whereas, for example, in Diablo, then if you identify it, that's when you know what item it is. So like they all look the same until you identify it. Is that something you ever considered having for Path of Exile? Like, for example, you find a unique gold amulet and you don't know if it's a Biscos or a Ignomnom until it's identified.
That's a good question. We could change it potentially. It's tricky to answer that for sure, because it sounds at face value like it would be a cool change to make, but you never know who's going to get upset at that, right? Like it's hiding information from the players on purpose, and we've got to be careful. Like I'll give you an example which isn't anything to do with this, but it reminds me of it. In other action RPGs, when you want to heal, you go to town and you have to talk to the NPC, right? Like this is like going to Act 1 and talking to Nessa to get healed. Now, we didn't do that in Path of Exile. As you know, just merely going to town heals you. And this is because we were lazy and we're just getting healing to work when you go to town. Like, it takes a whole bunch of work to add a healer NPC. Whereas if you just go, you're in town, heal the flasks up. And so we left it like that because we were lazy and didn't really consider it. So when we came to actually do this, we got to put on the list, okay, Nessa is the person you got to talk to. We thought, wait. We're about to make a change so that when someone portals to town to fill their flask, they then have to uselessly run up the stairs all the way to Nessa, click on it, run all the way back down to their portal, entirely because that's kind of a little bit better. It's a bit cooler to have to explicitly heal. You know, it helps keep the cycle a bit longer. We went to do this and realized people aren't going to accept this. This is going to be a complete failure. Like, there's going to be, we don't have to roll this back. There's going to be a backlash. People are going to think we're crazy. And so we didn't end up doing that change. And we just have to be careful when we consider stuff like this unique case here, where it makes it cooler 100% to not know which one it is till you ID it. It's technically worse for the players because it now means they can't tell what they got until they ID it. So it's taking something away, promising them, trust me, bro, this is going to make the game better for you. And that's just tough because it's a kind of subtle thing that seems easy as designers that causes backlash when the players actually get it and now they can't see what they get until they've ID'd it, by which time it's too late and so on. So I like the idea, but we're still careful with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, it was just a nostalgia idea from the Diablo 2 days, of course, but cool, that makes sense. That was pretty much all the questions I had. Is there anything you personally want to talk about?
I think we've covered a whole bunch of stuff there. No, I can't think of much. We've had a good chance to talk about the scope of the upcoming content. There's a patch coming in the next week or so, which does some stuff. What's in for that one? There's some map tab QOL stuff. There's the item information thing. There's a ton of minor fixes. So that's 3.1.2. That should be good. We have a fragment tab lined up for the future, which people have talked about a little bit, and that one's interesting. It actually took way more work than the other tabs because we've completely changed how these fragments work. This is going to get really technical and nerdy, but fragments were just normal items. Like, you get the fragment, it goes in the map, the map device and all this kind of stuff. They were just regular items. At no point did we consider needing to make them stackable because you get 4 and you put them in the thing. Why would you have more than 4? Maybe you have 10, or maybe you have 20. That's a manageable amount. We hadn't really considered the fact that some people will get a lot of these. So when it came to the fragment tab, we could design it the same way the map tab worked, where you've got a separate sub-tab for each type of fragment. But that's a real pain, because now when you fragments, you have to pull 4 out at a time. And so that would require that users have to go to a sub-tab, take out a fragment, have to go to another one, take out a fragment. It'll be a pain. So we figured, well, why not make these things stack, like actually stack to 5,000 like a currency tab does? So we put the work into this, and we realized in order to make it so that fragments can stack to 5,000, they basically need to be currency. The problem is they're not currency.
Right.
So we've made them currency. And this means there's now a complicated process so that the fragments magically turn into the currency versions of them. And it means the currency versions have to work exactly the same way in every single place in the game. Like, you put one in a map device next to a map and it increases the quality by the right amount. Previously done by reading the implicit mod that was invisible, but now it has to be done by looking it up in a table, and divine vessels have to work differently. And the end result is the player will notice nothing different. The new currency versions of the fragments look exactly the same. They function exactly the same, except they can stack in the fragment tab. So that's the plan, and that's taken inordinate amounts of work to do, and will be ready, in the future this year,
So
hopefully sooner rather than later.
that's something that'll also stack if you don't have the tab, right?
We're intending that they stay exactly the same as they currently are elsewhere. So you can't stack them in your inventory or regular
Okay.
tabs. They stack within this new tab. And that's basically the purpose of someone buying the tab, is they then get the ability to have a one-stop shop for all of their fragments. And I have heard the feedback from players wanting the ability to control-click items into the stash and have it automatically work out what tab these go in. This is a thing that's awesome to ask for. Pretty hard, honestly, to do that, because we don't have the tabs loaded until you see them, because some people have 1,000 tabs. But it's the kind of technical challenge that we're up for. So just like how the map tab was impossible and then we made it happen, and the fragment tab was impossible, then we're going to make it happen. We're going to work our way through getting impossible stuff done, because it will make the game better. And so these are things which I'm talking candidly about, not trying to ruin the announcement of them later,
Right.
but players can expect, with common sense, that we've been working on this kind of stuff anyway. And so, yeah, give us time, and when it's ready, we'll try to get it released so you guys can enjoy it.
I think the only other thing people are very curious about, is there any trade changes coming soon?
Nothing really worth talking about at the moment. I mean, it's an ongoing discussion,
Right.
but honestly, the changes to being able to filter AFK people out and having D&D people not appear on the list has substantially improved trade as far as we're concerned.
Yeah.
I mean, you've seen the manifesto where we've ranted about how we don't want trade to be too easy, and we're not backing down on that at the moment. But the changes we've been making have helped, and especially with the item sniping thing, where there's a delay on the API so that dedicated personal sniping tools don't work quite as effectively as before. This kind of stuff is helping the trade ecosystem, and we think it's in a relatively good place right now for what it is, considering a lot of people probably hate me saying that. We're still pretty happy with the improvements we've made, and we'll keep an eye out for similar types of improvements that we can make that have a similar kind of impact without being an auction house.
Yeah, no, I mean, the biggest thing I ever wanted was the D&D AFK thing, so very happy about that. Are there any imminent changes to Master in the way they level, or reworking like what you can craft with them?
Bits and pieces. You'll see more about that as we solidify it later in the future. I mean, all content in Path of Exile is on the block for improvement, right? So we improve acts, we improve maps, we'll improve masters, we'll improve old league content, the whole lot. We have some cool stuff. There's bits and pieces of the way hideouts work that we are keen to do. Now that we've got that hideout microtransaction tab that uses the new microtransaction stash system that we made, we're keen to make that a bit better in the future, and make it easier to access your hideouts and modify them. And one of the projects that we have for the future, I don't know if we've speculated on this publicly, is we're keen to unify hideouts so that you actually only have one hideout across all of the leagues, and that way you can make one kick-ass hideout and it never gets removed. So you just have your awesome hideout when the league starts. And obviously there's a ton of considerations there, like what size does it use, what masters are in it, blah, blah, blah. There's a bunch of stuff. But we'll work out solutions to this. This isn't a promise, because it's not a super high priority feature to get hideouts fixed right now, considering there's other content to make and other important things like Burning Ground to work on. Right. But we do have plans to take that part of the game and make it more impactful, because right now there's some cool hideouts being made in Standard or in the leagues, and they move back to Standard, and people do that once and then they've done it, and then their regular hideout in the league is just kind of a mess.
Right, yeah. That's really cool to hear with the hideout thing. I love doing a hideout, so yeah. I guess the one final question is one for me. Fishing in the game, can we fish?
I don't know, can you fish? I mean, try it.
I was really hoping. Tried so much. That was pretty much all the questions we have. And can we get, and everyone in chat, can we get some thank you, Chris, for coming and answering loads of questions? That was very, very cool. Thanks so much. And for getting up so early.
It wasn't really that bad. It was about 8 o'clock that I got up, so it's just like a normal day. It's okay, but yeah, I appreciated being able to come on and have a chat about stuff. I mean, don't interpret everything I've said as promises. I mean, I've already seen posts on Reddit like Chris promises X that isn't actually something that I said, and it's just me trying to give you guys an idea of what stuff is planned for the future. It could change, right? We could have some kick-ass idea for a new expansion that isn't this stuff, and then do that instead. But I'd like to give you guys a heads up as our core community members about the kind of things we're planning, and a reassurance that we read every thread, right? Like we sit there in the new queue, and we, even if no one upvotes it and agrees with you, we have read that.
Wow.
We even read our own forums, I mean, that happens too, and there's a lot of good suggestions there. And so there's there's plenty of discussion about the community's feedback, and we try very hard to factor it into Path of Exile releases because this is your game as much as it is ours. I mean, you are the guys actually in there playing all day, more so than most of our team members get time for, and so it's important that we look at what you guys think about it as well as our own personal plans for the project.
Well, I mean, just the fact that you took time out of your day to come here and answer questions for us, even if some things were slightly taken out of context or something, that's still amazing that you do take that time, and I think everyone in the entire community really appreciates that.
Oh, that's no problem. And plus, I know if someone takes something out of context, the rest of the people will correct them anyway, so it's going to be vicious out there.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. That was, yeah. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
you're welcome. It was awesome being here. Thanks.
So I'm going to end the call now, and I hope you have a great Sunday, dude. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, take care. Bye.
That was Chris Wilson, and hopefully all of you liked that. I'm sure there's some things I could have done better and stuff, but hopefully there was a lot of things that I got the answer to that I wanted. Really, really good. I'm very happy with that. What other game developers take like time to do stuff like that? Very, very cool. Very happy with how that went. Hopefully you guys like that. So I can load up Path of Exile again. Right.